pyramids, dolmens, temple complexes, cromlechs, menhirs. Some of them were erected tens of millennia ago. These megalithic structures amaze with their scale and design perfection. Their location, shape, and the images left of them were based on the knowledge of astronomy, geography, and higher mathematics. Modern humankind has yet been unable to reproduce the technology of their construction. Who built them and why? Why was it so important for previous civilizations to erect these structures? How can answers to these questions help us live through the phase of active climate cataclysms? Watch on April 13 in the Kaleidoscope of Facts, Mysteries of Ancient Civilizations, Megaliths and Artifacts. It is time to bring the truth back to people, initiated by participants from Lebanon, Turkey and Latin America.
Hola, queridos amigos.
Greetings, dear viewers. We are happy to welcome you to the live broadcast of the 21st episode of Kaleidoscope of Facts, Mysteries of Ancient Civilizations, Megaliths and Artifacts, initiated by participants of ALLATRA International Public Movement from Latin America, Turkey and Lebanon. The impulse to our researchers was the unique information from the books by Anastasia Novik and videos with the participation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Hello, friends. I have always been interested in ancient history. Every time after visiting megalithic complexes, I had these questions. How did these people live? Why this structure was so important to them? What is the connection between the Machu Picchu complex in Peru and the underwater pyramid on the other side of the world? Why were all the most ancient observatories located at latitudes 39 and 51 degrees? Today, we will try to solve the mystery of the ancient constructions together. I give the floor to Ksenia from Holland.
Thank you. Greetings. If we look at the history of humankind on a scale of several dozens of thousands of years, we see an interesting pattern that manifests itself in cyclical development. Human civilizations formed, developed, accomplished peaks, fell into decline and oblivion. Especially indicative of those stages are described in Hinduism: the era of Sato-yaga, the Golden Age, then successfully replaced by Treta Yaga, Dravapa Yaga, and Kali Yaga. Moreover, in each segment yaga within the cycle, the understanding of the truth and morality decreased, and the ignorance increased. All four areas make up a wheel of time. Humankind has gone through this cycle more than once. Where are those traces of this ancient civilization? And perhaps could they have sent us a message through the ages? Or can we ourselves learn from their mistakes? In fact, there is a great deal of evidence of ancient civilization all around us. All we have to do is to take a good look around us. Lebanon is a home of ancient temple, complex of Baalbek. It is believed that it was built during the hegemony of the Roman Empire in the Mediterranean, that is, about 2,000 years ago. Tourists from all over the world rush to Baalbek to see the ruins of the Roman temples. But in Baalbek, you can touch a much older history. It is an incredible size megalithic platform on which the temple complex has been built. The Baalbek terrace or veranda, as the scientists called it, is assembled from the monotonic stones with an average weight of 360 tons. The three most magnificent megalithic of the platform, each with a weight of 800 tons, from the so-called trilithon. The experts argue that Baalbek terrace was built long before the arrival of the Romans. It is clearly had a technical purpose. We don't know the methods of the constructing such a structure either in antiquity or even in the modern times. Even taking into account all our technical achievements, it's therefore highly probable that it was built by the previous civilizations. By the way, Arabs have a legend according to which Baalbek was restored after the flood. Another ancient structure can be found in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount or Mount of Mora. It's a place known since antiquity and revealed by the science. On the top of this mountain once stood the temple built by Solomon. Numerous tunnels have been discovered in the dungeons beneath the base of the temple with megalithic walls. These are giant stone blocks of various sizes. Some of them weigh up to 600 tons. In terms of technique and the masonry, those megaliths are very similar to Baalbek veranda. The same square holes on the sides, similar stone process, perfect joining. Many legends speculate who could have built such a structure, but it's clear that it was beyond the power of the King Heron or King Nimrod. We don't know the technology to do this build such a structure even today. 3,000 years, about how long the ancient Egyptian civilization flourished. The ancient Egyptians kept the tradition that if they built an important landmark structure, be it a temple or a pyramid, then only on the older foundation. They treasured the legends of the original temple, Zep-Tepi. This distant area at the time of Osiris, when the 7 wise men or building gods came to Egypt. They erected sacred mounds among the Nile, which then served as a basis for the construction of temple. Even when time destroyed those majestic structures, the Egyptians built them again and again according to the ancient drawings of the same basis, which, with their knowledge of the cyclical nature of time, they believed secretly that one day the beautiful era of the origin time would return again. That is why for the Egyptian, those places marked by the 7 wise men of antiquity were so important. The Egyptians have left us an entire library of information inscribed in stone, the texts of the pyramids, and the texts of the builders of Edfu. According to them, the old world was destroyed by the flood. The text of builders of Edfu repeatedly refer to the temple of Horus as a copy of earlier original version and recount the many stages of construction and rebuilding that resulted in temple's modern appearance. The pyramid of Unis, the lower part of which was megalithic masonry, was built in a similar way. Perhaps other iconic structures as well. A well-known sphinx, according to the estimates of various experts, was made long before the ancient Egyptians. On the Sphinx, there are obvious signs of water erosion. This evidence suggests that Sphinx witnessed the flood. At 72 degrees east of Giza, plateau in Cambodia, in the unique temple complex of Angkor Wat. It is considered one of the world's largest in area, 25 kilometers east to west and 8 kilometers north to south. It includes more than 1,000 temples surrounded by water channels, pools, and jungle. Likewise, pyramids in Giza repeated the location of the stars of Orion's belt. The main temple of Angkor repeated the location of the stars in the Dragon constellation. All of the main temples of Angkor also bear traces of the fact that they were built directly above the earth structures, and those were built above even older ones. There are plenty of examples when people build sacred complexes on the ancient bases. As a rule, these are complexes engineered structures, and they are found not only on our planet, In the fifth edition of Kaleidoscope of Facts, The Pyramids of the World, What is their role in times of global cataclysm? There were facts provided that neighboring Mars, on its surface, also locates unique structures, namely pentadal pyramids. As you can observe on the second image, there is a model of pyramids on Mars in the form of unique mathematical calculation. As we can clearly see, we still have a lot to figure out. Obviously, different civilizations may have evolved in different ways. This explains why we find ancient technologies on which we know nothing. For a long time, archaeological finds which contradicted official history were classified. But today, they have accumulated so much that it's time to resolve the truth to the public.
Gracias, Xenia.
Thank you. Thank you, Xenia. Indeed, so many new facts are being discovered now. And puzzles are beginning to come together into a unified picture. And throughout the world, there is a tendency for pyramids or temple complexes to have been built on ancient foundations. And it is interesting that despite the grandiosity of the constructions, no traces of tools that were used in their construction have been found anywhere yet. In our studies, we rely not only on scientists' discoveries, but also on ancient writings. Let us watch an excerpt from the video with the participation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
And it is precisely the most ancient writings that tell us what happened, what people experienced and why it happened. Again, they contain not only history, but also the knowledge that we are approaching only now. You see? How did people thousands of years ago know things that science is just beginning to grasp from other civilizations? In such a case, this completely undermines the whole concept, the very Darwinism that we got off the palm tree or something. Is that not so? And all the other tenets. And so we live in these lies. Well, now, thank God it is crumbling. Now, excuse me, only a fool can argue about those very megaliths that are 24,000 years old,
and more.
36,000-year-old megaliths that are standing, and they are made with a technology that we cannot replicate today. It's just that there were more advanced civilizations.
Yes, because you look at what we leave behind.
Yes.
How about houses which are washed away by any floods?
Everything will collapse.
Yes.
I'll go back a little, excuse me, to our conversation about those very factories and everything else. After all, no highly developed civilization has any factories. But nevertheless, they have enormous resources. If we even go back a little bit, well, let's say to the time of Atlantis here, what do we see today? They're megaliths that are technically processed, moreover processed at a level that we are incapable of today, meaning the remnants of that ancient civilization. After all, the artifacts are extremely complex, which are extremely hard to restore today, and it's not clear, yet we hardly see any factories or anything else. Why? A simple question. Right? It's because the first level gives tremendous opportunities, although they didn't reach it. They advanced technologically, but they didn't reach that very first level because power was preserved and thus they remained uncivilized.
To learn more about what civilized society is and what levels of its development it goes through, watch the 8th episode of Kaleidoscope of Facts, Perspectives of Civilization. And I have a question. How was it possible, without having factories, to create such high-tech structures that have been standing for centuries? What kind of technology they were? And what kind of legacy will we leave for the next generation? We will talk about this a bit later. But for now, we'll continue to get acquainted with the most ancient megalithic structures on our Earth. Marcelo, you have a floor.
El yacimiento megalítico de Gunung Padang
Yes,
se
thanks.
encuentra cerca de
In the
Java
region of
Occidental,
West
Indonesia.
Java, Indonesia, there
un
is a
complejo
megalithic site of
monumental.
Gunung Padang. It's
La
a
primera
monumental
mención del
complex.
complejo
Its total
fue en
area is
1914,
29 hectares
pero
and
el primer estudio
220
por parte
meters.
de científicos
It
y
is
arqueólogos fue
located
realizado
at the
solo
altitude
en
of 1,400
1979.
meters above sea
En la cima de
level.
la montaña
This
se
complex was the first
encontraron
mentioned in
cientos de bloques de
1914,
piedra con
but the
formas
first
regulares,
research was carried out by
dispuestos en un
researchers and
determinado
geologists
orden.
only in
Así que surgieron
1979.
las primeras preguntas.
At the top of the
¿Quién hizo
mountain,
estos
they found
megalitos?
hundreds
¿Por
of
qué?
stone blocks of correct shape arranged in a certain order.
¿Cómo se
So the
elevaron
first
a una
questions
altura de
arose.
1400
First,
metros sobre
who
el nivel
made
del
these
mar?
megaliths? Why are there? And the third question,
En la
how
isla
were they
de Java
lifted to a height of
existe una antigua
1,400
leyenda
meters above sea level?
asociada a una
On the
montaña
island of
sagrada
Java,
en la
there is
que
an
un tal
ancient
rey,
legend,
Lawangi, gobernó la
legend
zona por un
associated with the
millar y
sacred
medio de
mountain, where a
años
certain
antes de
king,
Cristo.
Silavani,
Construyó en
who
una
ruled the
noche
area
un
of
palacio
1,000 and
de la brillante
half years
montaña,
before Christ, in
donde
one night built
observa
a
las
palace on
estrellas.
top of the bright
Los
mountain,
indonesios creen
from where
en el
he
origen
watched the
antiguo y
stars.
divino del hallazgo.
Some
Creen que
Indonesians
sus
believed
islas
in the
en realidad
ancient and
fragmentos de la
divine
Lemuria
origin of
prehistórica.
this
Se
finding.
llaman a sí
They
mismos
believe that
los
their islands are
grandes
actually
lemurianos.
fragments of prehistoric Lemuria.
Temu
They call
es un
themselves
antiguo
the
continente que
descendants
existió
of the
dentro de los
great
océanos
Lemurians.
Pacífico e Índico.
Lemurians, or the continent of Mu,
En
is an
2011,
ancient
un
continent
equipo de
that
científicos
existed within
dirigidos
the
por el
Pacific and
geofísico
Indian
Danny
Oceans.
Hillman y Adawid Jaga
In 2011,
del
a team of
Instituto de
scientists
Ciencias de
led by
Indonesia comenzó la
geophysicist
investigación
Danny Hillman
arqueológica en este
Natalia
lugar.
from the Indonesian
Usaron
Institute of
la
Sciences
topografía,
began
el
archaeological
GPR
research
y
here.
las excavaciones
They
arqueológicas.
used
Y así fue que
surveying,
descubrieron que
GPR, and
Gunung Padang
archaeological
es una
excavations and
estructura
discovered
compleja de
that
varias
Gunung
capas.
Padang is a complex structure of several layers.
Determinaron que era una pirámide enorme
It
de
was
200
determined
metros de
that it
altura,
is a
en
huge
comparación con la
pyramid,
gran pirámide de
200
Giza,
meters high. For comparison, the height
38
of the
metros de
Great
altura.
Pyramid in Giza is
La pirámide incluye más de
138
400
meters.
escalones que
The
se
pyramid
alternaron
includes more
con
than
5
400
grandes
steps,
terrazas.
which alternate with 5 large
La montaña en sí está formada por
terraces.
enormes bloques de basalto.
The
En
mountain
algunos
itself
lugares
consists
con
of
restos de
massive basalt
mecanización.
blocks, in some
Según
places with
los
traces
análisis
of
de
artificial
radiacarbon,
processing.
la pirámide podría
According
haber sido
to
construida hace
radiocarbon
unos
analysis,
15.000
the
a 18.000
pyramid could be
años.
constructed approximately
Se perforaron varios
15,
pozos para determinar su edad
28,000 years
exacta.
ago. To
Y
define the
resultó
exact
tener
age, some pits were punched.
y
The
a medida
pyramid
que
appeared
avanzaban en la profundidad, los
multi-level.
científicos
As
encontraron
they moved
especímenes
deeper,
cada vez
scientists
más
found
antiguos,
more and more ancient
3.000
specimens,
años,
3,000 till 5,000 years,
9.600 años,
9,600
de 11.000 años.
years, 11,000 years.
Se levantó
And from
una
the depths
muestra
of
de
30
30
meters,
metros de
a sample
profundidad
was
que
raised,
resultó tener
the age of which
22.000
turned out
años.
to be 22,000
Así que la
years.
pirámide se construyó durante miles
It
de
turns
años.
out that the
Cada
pyramid
nueva
was being
adición
built for
se basa en
thousands
una
of years.
estructura que ya
Each
tenía
new
miles de años.
superstructure was based on a structure
Una
already
incógnita.
thousands of
¿Cuándo se
years
colocó
old.
la base de la
A
pirámide?
question
Ya
remains
que aún
open.
hay que
When the
perforar
base of pyramid
150
has
metros.
been put, it's necessary to drill 150
Escaneo de
meters to
Gunung
reach
Padang
it.
reveló que
Scanning of
a
Gunung
una profundidad
Padang
de
showed
25 metros
that at the depth of 25 meters from the surface,
llamado
there is a
corazón de
chamber,
la montaña,
the so-called
un área
heart of the
cúbica
mountain,
de 10 metros
measuring
por lado.
10 by 10 meters,
Y destaca también
10 cube.
una capa de la zona en la que se hace
Noteworthy is
referencia
also
a
a
las
map
masas
of
de
the
agua.
area, which
Se hace una
indicates
comparación
the
con el
reference to
tipo de
water
agua.
bodies and even a comparison with the view of the weapon.
En este
In this
diagrama vemos
diagram, we see
que
that the
en el
Padang
enorme
mountain
monte
is
Padang
located
está
from
situado
north
en el norte,
to
está situado de
south.
norte a sur. La vista superior muestra que la
The top
pirámide
view
de
shows
Gunung
that
Padang
the Gunung
tiene la
Padang
forma de un
pyramid is
arma
shaped like
tradicional
a
indonesia.
traditional
El arma
Indonesian
en sí
weapon.
se
The gun
muestra en la
itself
parte superior del
is
diagrama
shown at the
en el
top
lado
of
derecho.
the diagram on the right side.
En el monte Padang hay 7
There are
manantiales.
7 springs
4 de
found
estos
on Mountain
se
Padang,
encuentran ubicados
4
hacia
of
los
which
4
are on
lados
4
del mundo.
sides of the world.
De norte a sur
From
corre
north to
un arroyo
south runs
subterráneo,
an underground
uno de
stream,
los 3 ríos
one
que
of the
rodea la
3
pirámide.
rivers surrounding the pyramid.
Aguas del río
The
Chicuta
waters of Chikuta River
desembocan en un
flow
embalse
into an
subterráneo bajo el
underground
monte Padang.
reservoir under mountain Padang. Researchers have shown that in the bowels of the pyramid there is another reservoir in the form of a small blue lake. Unusual was the discovery of researchers. At a depth of 12 meters in the tunnel, they found a stone embedded in the wall. It has a round shape and black in color. The mineralogical composition of the stone differs significantly from the other stones in the tunnel. Eric Ritsky, one of the members of the archaeological team, stated that the stone they found in the wall can rotate in all directions like a wheel. The purpose of the stone is unknown, but the round shape clearly demonstrates that the stone is human-made. The stones at the top of the mountain are also unusual. When they are struck with a hard object, they resonate in the tones of bells. This rare phenomenon, known as lithopholy, refers to the ability of some stones to produce music-like sounds under external influence. In October 2014, a metal object was found in the eastern part of the mountain, only adding to the mystery. Scientists determined its age to be 11,000 years old, and metallurgists found aluminium in its composition. The composition of the alloy was tested in the laboratory of metallurgy and minerals at the technical faculty of the Indonesian Institute. The artifact proves that in prehistoric times, people were already using metallurgical techniques. They were able to make strong alloys. We make aluminium by electrolysis, but how did they make it in Java 11,000 years ago? Did they have electricity, or did they have methods of isolating chemical elements unknown to us? Geologist Danny Natavijaya identified another of the artifacts as part of the ancient power plant. According to the scientists, these artifacts are made of copper and gold and date back to the 11th millennium BC. According to Natavijaya, it's a unique temple. It's a really big place. People think that prehistoric times were primitive, but this monument proves that this is not the case. And I would like to note the unique similarities between the archaeological complexes of Gunung Padang in Indonesia and Machu Picchu in Peru. These two complexes are united not only by external similarity. Machu Picchu and Gunung Padang are rotated on the opposite sides of the Earth, on meridian 100 degrees apart. This fact can be easily identified with the help of Google Earth program. All these data suggest that Gunung Padang is much older than any non-artificial structure in the world. Found artifacts, sophisticated engineering in the construction of the complex indicate a high level of development of the civilization which built Gunung Padang. The orientation of the complex to the sun and stars indicates that the builders had knowledge of astronomy and topography. To date, very many open questions remain. Who and why built such a complex? What was its purpose? What are the connections between Gunung Padang and other megalithic complexes? The answers to those questions have not yet found out. Erika will tell us more about the megalithic complexes Machu Picchu. Thank you so much.
Marcelo. Machu Picchu, del quechua machu, que significa viejo, y picchu, que significa pico, es decir, pico viejo. Es el nombre moderno que se le da a la antigua yacta de piedra inca. Machu Picchu se considera una obra maestra, tanto arquitectónica como de ingeniería. Machu Picchu fue construido en un lugar donde hay fallas tectónicas. Así lo demuestra el análisis geoarqueológico de Rualdo Méniga.
Machu Picchu was built in a place where there were tectonic faults. This is confirmed by geoecological analysis of Rolnango Mineta, a geologist from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul from Brazil.
Habría sido imposible construir un sitio así en la alta montaña.
The location of Machu Picchu is no accident, Magnet says in a statement published by the Geological Society of America. It would have been impossible to build such a site in the high mountains if the substrate had not been fractured, he adds. Using a combination of satellite imagery and field measurements, Menegat mapped a dense network of fractures and tectonic faults. Interestingly, these faults form an X latter that intersects below Machu Picchu.
Tectonic faults in the area have directed meltwater and rainwater directly to this site, the study says. In addition, building the sanctuary at such an high altitude may be possible to isolate it from avalanches and landslides, which are very common in this high altitude area. Earlier cracks contributed to the process of underground drainage and contributed to its remarkable preservation. It is believed that the construction of Machu Picchu was during the reign of the Inca Pachacutec in 1450 in the Christian era. However, there are some facts that show that the foundation of Machu Picchu is much older. We will talk about this a little bit later today. In the meantime, I would like to tell you about the complex itself, the Machu Picchu complex. Among all the structures, there is a part of megalithic masonry, which was obviously inherited by the Incas from a much more advanced civilization. The center of Machu Picchu, its heart, so to say, is represented by a group of temple buildings made in Cyclopean masonry technique, using polygonal blocks and huge machines monoliths. Interestingly, such Cyclopean masonry is found in the Olatambiana complex and Sacsayhuaman. In the lower part of the temple district of Machu Picchu, there is a unique semi-circular structure called the Temple of the Sun. It's built around a carved boulder and inscribed into the mother rock. The windows of the Temple of the Sun allowed astronomical observations. The window marked in red in this picture is the largest of the three windows of the vault, and is called the snake window. It faces northwest as an azimuth of about 380 degrees. During the winter solstice, at dawn, you can see the setting of the stars of the Big Dipper's tail, lined up in a curved snake-like shape. The window, which we identified as number 2 in this picture, in orange, facing northeast on the azimuth of about 65 degrees, aligns with the sunrise at the winter solstice. On this day, the first ray of the sunlight casts its ray of light on a stone carved into the floor. A few hours before that, the Pleiades and the Hyades can be seen with their bright red star Aldebaran heralding the arrival of the sun. Through the third window, which is number 1 in this picture and marked in yellow, located in southeast at about 132 degrees azimuth, the part corresponding to the tail of the western constellation of Scorpio, which with its shape is approximately the design of the turret, is visible. There are many versions regarding the carved stone on the floor on which the sun's shadow is cast during the winter solstice. It is supposed to be a symbol of the 3 Andean worlds, the upper world, Hanan Pacha, the earthly world, Kai Pacha, and the world of the dead, Uhu Pacha. Right under the rocks of the tower, which houses the Temple of the Sun, there is a grotto of another very unique room, carved monoliths and fantastic masonry of shaped blocks inscribed into the rock folds and laid without any mortar. It feels like people
in the past worked here not with granite but with plasticine. Scientists will displace the temple of Panchamama, Mother of the Earth. The fencing of the Especios de Cacua is associated with the path of the sun during the June solstice and equinoxes. There are two round-shaped vessels carved in a natural outcrop of granite resembling mortars, because of which of these places, also known as the Sala de los Morteros, mortar room, they are located on the floor of one of the sections of the temple of the Virgin of the Sun. There are also similar vessels elsewhere in the Andes called cochas. They may be made of stone, pottery, or wood, and were used to contain water brought from sacred lakes or rivers to observe this reflection of the sun, moon, and the stars. Thus, they function as a water mirror.
Se encuentra en el suelo de un tramo del templo de la Virgen del Sol.
Our next speakers will also talk about the oldest observatories of the world a little bit later. All of the above represent the evidence of the sacred nature of the settlement.
Y que se utilizaban para contener el agua traída de los lagos y ríos sagrados.
The relationship of the mountains upper in its location, the layout and the orientation of the building, most of which pick up energy through the entrance doors and windows.
Sobre los observatorios más antiguos del mundo hablarán nuestros ponentes más adelante. Todo lo anterior evidencia el carácter sagrado de la yacta, la relación de las montañas Apu con su ubicación, la disposición y
Maria
orientación
Schulten,
de
the Elbled, discovered
la
that
mayoría de ellos recogen la
the
energía
65 degrees geodesic line on which Machu Picchu is located fits into a grid, so that the angles rather than the sides of the Inca city of Machu Picchu point in 4 cardinal directions.
encaja en una cuadrícula, de modo que los ángulos o los lados de la ciudad inca apuntan en
Renowned scholars from around the globe always say that aligning temples, say sacred sites, along with geodesic lines, indicate a very advanced knowledge of geography and astronomy. It is hard to believe, understand this indeed. The Viracocha route is a geodesic alignment in the southeast and northwest direction. It is also known the Chapacnan Inca Road Network and aligns the main cult centers of Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, Nazca, and some Mayan cities in Central America.
Y alinea los principales centros de Cusco,
Republics of Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru share this network over 23,000 kilometers, which is known to connect several production, administrative, and ceremonial centers built over 2,000 years ago in the pre-Inca Andean cultures. This is to the discussion of who could have built this huge complex. There is such an opinion that Incas actually were the ones who finished these structures they inherited from more ancient civilizations. Until today, there is still a secret why these structures were actually built and why they were built with, according to this latitude of 45 degrees. Now let's go back to the issue who actually built this complex.
He aquí el testimonio de Garcilaso de la Vega, escritor e historiador peruano. Es autor de los libros
Incas actually could not build such cyclopic buildings. Let's provide the testimony of Garcilaso de la Vega, a Peruvian writer and historian. He's the author of the books Genuine Commentaries and the General History of Peru. He described an unsuccessful attempt by the Incas
themselves. To his records, one of the Inca emperors gathered 20,000 men and ordered them to lift one of the megaliths onto the mountains, which have been left in a quarry near Ollantaytambo. The experiment ended in a tragedy. A huge block fell off and thousands of Indians died. And another fact is the instantaneous and complete loss of megalithic building skills by the Incas. During the whole period of colonial domination, not a single structure has been created on the vast territory of the Inca Empire, which could be compared in quality to at least one of the three sections of the long wall of Ollantaytambo. And it is believed that the invasion of the Spanish conquistadors caught the construction of the complex at full swing. The situation in Machu Picchu is the same as in Ollantaytambo. The Incas built their sacred city on the site of a much older sanctuary, which may have been used by more than one previous civilization. And most importantly, those civilizations were far superior to the Incas in their capabilities and technology. Now I give the floor back to Pedro, and we'll continue our journey through the sacred sites of South America.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation, Erika. Sacsayhuaman is located 2 kilometers north of the Plaza de Armas in Cusco, Peru. It is located at the altitude of 3,700 meters above sea level. The term Sacsayhuaman means in Quechua the place where the falcon is satisfied. According to the official version, it is a stone fortress with a palace built by Incas, but the grandiosity of the structure and the highest precision of the stonework indicates that its builders far surpassed the Inca civilization in the level of their technique and technology. This monument is well known primarily for its Cyclopean walls. There are almost no analogues of this construction in Peru. Almost no, because at the nearby monument of Kenco Chico, located about a kilometer from Sacsayhuaman, one of the sides of the hill is reinforced with the same granite blocks, but there are 3 rows of walls. Today, it is estimated that Sacsayhuaman has preserved only 40% of its ancient structure. Despite this, there are structures weighing up to 125 tons on the site. The precision of stoneworking is amazing. They are not just precisely cut. Huge boulders weighing dozens and hundreds of tons are literally rubbed against each other so that it is impossible to put a piece of paper between them. It is interesting that each of the thousands of stones has its individual shape. There are no two identical. One more peculiarity is that the corners of the stones have a curved radius. Similar elements are often found in the megalithic structures of Peru and Bolivia. In some places, the masonry is repaired with small stones, and the difference of technology is easily noticeable. There are interesting connections and similarities in Cyclopean building techniques between Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo, Sacsayhuaman, and Baalbek. We see the same picture, in which later cultures built their own technologically simple structures in place of huge megalithic structures. The question remains open: why did these places remain sacred for later cultures as well? Opposite the zigzag walls, there is a rock with a strange erased surface. From a distance, it gives the impression of rocks licked by a powerful glacier. Similar forms occur in nature, but there are a number of oddities. Firstly, there are no glaciers of any comparable power nearby. Secondly, the neighboring rocks have nothing similar in shape. Thirdly, the lake surface is observed not only at the top, but also on the side, on nearly vertical walls. And fourthly, the rock seems to be covered in a kind of glaze, the outer layer about a millimeter thick, which differs sharply in texture and color from the material below.
En algunos lugares hay capas endurecidas sobre el esmalte, lo que indica la grave antigüedad del impacto.
At the same time, in some places there are hardened layers on top of the glaze, which indicates a serious age of artificial exposure if it took place. The rock has artificial indentations in many places, the creation of which requires very non-trivial technology, especially considering that it is diorite. The hardness of diorite on the Mohs scale is 8, the same as that of granite. At the top of the rock is the famous throne of Inca. There are many hypotheses as to why this complex was built, but the place has not yet been fully explored. And to understand what the megalithic complexes around the world were built for, it is necessary to involve specialists from different fields of sciences. That is, an interdisciplinary approach as is necessary, as for example in the study of the Bosnian pyramids. And in the meantime, even what is discovered does not receive proper research. I will tell you about one of such discoveries further. It is about a megalith in Ecuador.
Situado en la provincia de la Suárez, parroquia Río Negro,
in National Park Lagannates, located in the
Esto apoya la hipótesis de que si fue creado por el hombre,
in National Park Lagannates, located in the community of Azuay in Rio Negro, canton of Baños de Agua Santa, Tungurahua province, Ecuador. On the hillside there can be seen a megalith where carved stone blocks suggest an ancient pyramid. This confirms the hypothesis that if this site was man-made, it is indeed ancient, much older than other already known in Ecuador. Wilder Vinuesa, a community member from the Azuay area, is one of the first to research the mysterious structure. According to several researchers, it is the largest find ever found. It is about 80 meters high and wide, and the slope is too steep to be considered a natural formation. Manuel Palacios, an Ecuadorian researcher, says that according to José Gamarra, a famous Peruvian researcher, the Urinpacha construction system, a kind of Andrian concrete, may have been used. The stonework is reminiscent of that seen at other ancient sites in Peru, such as Fort Sacsayhuaman. A hard, adhesive substance like cement or concrete is found between the blocks. A closer look, however, reveals that it may also be some kind of glassy material. Evidence of other examples of vitrified clay is also found in other sites of ancient settlements in Latin America. Judging by the apparent age of the ruins, this may be earliest example of concrete use in the Americas. Andreas Palacios, an Ecuadorian geologist, seeing and feeling the sloping stone wall, said nature molds differently. This is man-made. The hidden structure was built using hundreds of large, irregularly shaped stones, each weighing about 2 tons. On top of the structure, a flat platform is located. It appears that the builders of this ancient citadel had engineering skills well ahead of their time. A waterfall runs down the sloping stone wall from the top, not to mention the fact that it is at the foot of a river, Rio El Tigre. Unfortunately, no more detailed research has been done on the structure. Thank you very much for your attention.
Gracias, Pedro.
Thank you, Petra. While researching this topic with friends, we paid attention to the common features of the ancient buildings, the external resemblance, the location, the presence of water sources, the orientation to the sides of the world. We added those distant civilizations which mostly used the technique of megalithic and cyclopean masonry have such knowledge from. I suggest watching an excerpt from the video Atlantis, the Elite in Search of Immortality.
Megaliths. So, was there a civilization in ancient times with high technologies, the development of which exceeded the discoveries of modern science? Certainly. More information on the science of antiquity may be found in the Primordial Electrophysics report. As of today, there are a lot of artifacts, ranging from the remnants of ancient knowledge and up to megalithic structures, ideally preserved over millennia. It is enough for any skeptic to pay attention to the very science of the ancient East and ask oneself a question, from where the ancients knew accurate values in geometry, mathematics, and physics. But perhaps the most obvious evidence is the megalithic cities located in different parts of the world, and the technology of their construction, which modern humankind cannot reproduce until today. Monoliths, menhirs, pyramids, cities, temples, palaces, airports, and other ancient buildings that have been discovered in different parts of the world, amazed by their scale, stability, and perfection of structures. Almost all the buildings of antiquity were erected of large and heavy stones, megaliths that weighed several dozens and sometimes hundreds of tons, sometimes in the building masonry and in the form of separate monoliths. There are also heavy stone blocks, trilithons, the weight of which is over 1,000 tons. Engineers of the distant past had the knowledge of how to make a solid structure of stones with an enormous weight, how to lift large stone blocks to set them at a high altitude and fasten together without mortar. They knew how to make a polygonal laying, how to make high-quality alloys for solid metal bracings. Even today, we can see that cuts on the stones are made by mechanisms with pinpoint accuracy, which produce the effect of a tight fit of the stones, in the chunks between which it's impossible to insert even a razor blade. Masters of the past left lots of marks that indicate the use of high-tech equipment. Superpower, circular slabs, grinding machines, drills, possibly ultrasonic, cutters, and many other devices that the current civilization is yet unaware of. The traces left impress with their flatness, ultra-thinness, and accuracy. Large sizes and high quality of the devices themselves, which can easily deal with the stone products of high-quality hard rocks. Megaliths were made at a high level not just technically, but also their location. The form of constructions, the images left on the stones were made based on the knowledge of astronomy, geography, advanced mathematics, and other exact sciences.
Indeed, there are more than enough facts that prove the existence of ancient, highly developed civilizations. However, there is a lack of the systematization and closer study. It is interesting that megalithic structures are not only found on the surface of the earth, but also underwater. Emine will tell us about this.
Greetings. The Yonaguni underwater complex is located at a depth of 25 meters near one of the islands of the Japanese prefecture of Okinawa. It includes stepped terraces. The tallest pyramid is 600 feet, 180 meters wide, and 90 feet, 30 meters high. Studies show that the Yonaguni complex may have risen above the surface of the water at least 10,000 years ago, when the water level in the world ocean was 40 meters lower than nowadays. The dating of nearby vegetation remains is indicative of approximately the same age, since such vegetation is typical for the dry soil, not the seabed. It turns out that the Yonaguni complex had gone underwater much earlier than the Egyptian pyramids were erected. The Yonaguni monument was discovered by an experienced diver, Kihatira Aratake, in 1986. He told Dr. Masaaki Kimura, a marine geologist and professor of the Department of Physics and Earth Science at Rutgers University, about his discovery. Kihitaro himself dove to the seabed more than 100 times. In 2001, at a scientific conference in Japan, Masaaki Kimura presented his research and a computer model of the ruined site and claimed that an unknown city of ancient origin has been found there. Kimura presented photographs, finds, diagrams, and drawings to the general public. The large structure looks like a complex, monolithic, stepped pyramid that rises from a depth of 25 meters, Kimura said at the interview for the National Geographic News in 2007. Professor claimed that the massive stones blocks were part of a huge man-made complex carved right in the rock. Kimura also found numerous tunnels, wells, stairs, terraces, and even swimming pool. According to the Professor Kimura, there are 10 other structures underwater near Yonaguni, and 5 more similar structures are located near Okinawa Island. The massive ruins cover an area of more than 4,500 square meters. The city is surrounded by a road and a stone fence consisting of huge chunks of rock. Professor Kimura discovered that a part of the fence which surrounds the monument is made of limestone. This limestone is not found in this region. Professor claims that someone in prehistoric times transported limestone specially for construction. Kimura also discovered many details of the rock which indicate a man-made formation of this object. There are traces of welding, symmetrical and angular channels, circular holes 2 meters in depth, traces of carvings, sculptural objects, and wide flat platforms. There are also stones covered with an ornament of rectangles and rhombuses. This evidence suggests that the structure is not only man-made, but was probably built on dry land. The 2 twin stones of Yonaguni, which are strictly rectangular in shape, are also quite interesting. They are made of a limestone. This material cannot be split so smoothly and evenly, which means that someone created them for a purpose. The 6-meter stones resemble twin megaliths found in other parts of Japan. It is interesting that the Yonaguni underwater complex is similar to the high-altitude complexes of Sacsayhuaman and Machu Picchu in Peru, as well as Gunung Padang pyramid in Indonesia. These complexes are located at high altitudes and represent freestanding structures. They rest on a platform, the edges of which drop vertically downwards. Let's recall that the Gunung Padang pyramid and the Yonaguni underwater complex are much older than Machu Picchu and Sacsayhuaman. Moreover, they are located in different parts of the globe. Nevertheless, we can see their structural similarities. In this regard, several questions arise. What kind of technology was used to build these complexes? What kind of knowledge allowed building such structures? How did ancient people acquire this knowledge? Why has this knowledge been lost nowadays? Thank you.
Thank you, Emine. It is amazing that Yonaguni structures that are now underwater off the coast of Japan, so similar to the complexes in South America and in Indonesia that we spoke about earlier. And we continue to explore the subject of underwater megaliths further. And I pass the floor to Cristina.
Hola.
Hello, everyone. On the islands of Bimini, in the depth of the sea lies an unknown structure of stone blocks. Not far from the stone blocks, laid out in two parallel lines, stretches a J-shaped arm of stone. The structure belongs to the Megalithic type. In fact, some of the slabs of the Bimini Road are up to 6 meters long. They are located at a depth of 3 up to 9 meters, but thanks to the absolutely clear water, they are perfectly visible from the surface of the sea. The total length of the road is 500 meters and its width is 90 meters. And there is more than one road, two more smaller roads joined at a small angle. The main road is lined with stones, the size of which reach up to 4 meters. There are also up to 6 meters. The size of the stones of additional roads is smaller, about 1 or 2 meters, and all the blocks consist of limestone and have rounded edges. This construction is not chaotic. There is no disorderly piling up of stones. None of the blocks overlaps the other one. In addition, there are very few stones in the vicinity at all. The square or rectangular stone steps are also neighbors of a small paved path at regional dolmens made in the form of a clay topped with a massive slab on top, and we can say that it is, that near the Bimini Road there are also foundations of some structures, remnants of walls, and probably the roofs of buildings, only slightly protruding over the centuries-old bottom sediments. The exact age of the Bimini Road has not yet been determined. According to some sources, it is about 3,600 years old. Others say it is about 15,000 years old. On September the 2nd, 1968, while diving off the northwest coast of North Bimini Manson, Valentin, Jacques, Mayon, and Robert Engel first discovered this mysterious structure. In the early 1970s, archaeologist David Zink worked with professional divers from the U.S. Navy to study the Bimini Road. They took fragments of Bimini stones for study and later stated that the chemical composition of the blocks is not the usual coastal rock fragments but specially processed slabs. It is possible that they are composite material similar to concrete. According to another version, the Bimini blocks are made of mixed rock composed of silicious shale and limestone. Such rocks are not found in the Bahamas. And in addition, archaeologists have demonstrated a stone on which tongues running along the entire land, roofs for combining structures, that is, are visible on both sides. And on the third side, there is a long longitudinal groove into which the tongue of another block should have ended.
Algunos bloques de la carretera de
Some blocks
Bimini
of the
son
Bimini
tan
road
suaves
are
como
as
una
smooth
mesa
as a
pulida.
polished table.
La naturaleza no puede
Nature
trabajar
cannot
la
press
piedra tan
stone so thoroughly.
meticulosamente.
Only a
Solo el
human
hombre puede hacerlo.
can do this with the
Utilizando
help of complex
herramientas
tools.
sofisticadas, los
Archaeologists
arqueólogos
have
han
suggested
estimado
that they're
su antigüedad
10,000 to
entre 10.000 y
14,000 years
14.000
old.
años. En la década de 1980 se realizaron
In the
excavaciones en el yacimiento con un
1980s,
taladro.
bottom samples were taken
Esto
from this
revelaron
place with the help of a
fragmentos
drill.
de
They
roca
found
que no se
fragments of
podían
rock that
encontrar
could
en
not
los
have been in the
alcantilados costeros.
coastal rocks.
Se encontró granito, que no es
Granite,
una
which is
roca
not a
natural de las
natural
Bahamas.
rock for the
También
Bahamas,
resultó
was
que las
found.
rocas vecinas
It has
que
also been
conformaban la
found that
carretera de
neighboring
Bimini
stones that make up the
contienen a
Bimini
veces
Road sometimes
componentes
contain
geológicos
different geological components. For
diferentes. Por ejemplo,
example,
el aragonito
aragonite
está
is in one
en una
and
y la calcita en
calcite
otra.
is in another neighboring stone. This is not like This is
En
not
2003
like the
y
chemical
2004, el
uniformity
equipo
that
del
is
investigador
characteristic of
Greg
naturally occurring
descubrió al menos
coastal
2 capas
rocks.
más de este tipo bajo los bloques de la carretera de
In
Bimini.
2003-2004,
otra teoría.
researcher Greg
La
Little's group
carretera de
discovered
Bimini
at
no es
least 2
realmente
more
una
similar
carretera,
layers under the blocks of the
sino la parte
Bimini Road.
superior de
But
muros
another version was
o
born,
edificios de
the
algún
Bimini
tipo.
Road, not really
Por
road,
ello,
but
el
rather
lugar
the
se llama
upper
a
part
veces
of the
los muros
walls
de
of some
Bimini.
buildings.
Utilizando
That is
instrumentación
why this
moderna, los
landmark is sometimes called
expedicionarios
the walls of Bimini.
descubrieron que la
Using modern
estructura contiene
instruments,
huecos
the
e incluso
expedition
metal.
members
Esto
found
es
that
extremadamente
there are
sorprendente,
voids and
ya que no
even
hay
metal in
depósitos
the
de metal
structure, and
ni en
this
las
is
Bahamas
extremely
ni en las
surprising
proximidades de
because
las
there are
carreteras.
no metal deposits
Los
either
indios
in
que
the
vivían en
Bahamas or
Bimini,
near
incluso
the
antes de
road.
la llegada de
The
los
Indians living
españoles
on
en el
Bimini,
siglo
even
XVI,
before the Spanish
llamaban
arrived
a su
there in the
isla
15th
el lugar
century,
con
called
muros.
the island
Sin embargo,
called the
nunca se
island
ha
of the
encontrado.
place with
Este antiguo
walls.
nombre se
However,
refiere
no walls have
probablemente a
ever
las
been found
enormes
on the
hileras
island
de piedra
itself.
que ahora
Therefore,
yacen
this
en las
ancient name
profundidades,
most
no
likely
lejos de
refers
la
to
orilla.
those massive stone rows
Los indios
that are now
locales
located at
también
depth
llamaban
not far from the
al
shore.
Bimini
The local
el lugar
Indians
de la
also
corona
called Bimini the
o
place
corona,
with a
en
crown,
clara
or the
referencia
crown,
a algún tipo
clearly
de estructura
referring to
en
some
forma de anillo.
shaped structure.
Afirmaban que las
They
Bahamas
claimed
eran
that
solo una
Bahamas
parte
were
de
just
una gran
part of a
masa de
large
tierra
land
que había
mass
sido
that had
destruida
been ruined
por
by the
manos del mar.
hands of the sea.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Sí, Cristina. Las estructuras submarinas sugieren que nuestra Tierra
Thank you very
puede
much,
experimentar
Christina.
desastres climáticos.
The underwater structures
Esta puede
suggest
haber
that
sido una
our
de las
Earth
razones
experienced
por las que las
climate
civilizaciones murieron
cataclysms, and this may
y
have
los
been one
conocimientos
of
se
the
perdieron.
reasons that
Que estos
civilizations
conocimientos
perished and the
existían
knowledge
lo
was lost.
demuestran no solo las
The fact that
estructuras
this knowledge
megalíticas,
has existed
sino
is
también
evidence
los
that not only by
artefactos que
megalithic
se están
structures, but also
encontrando en
by
todo el mundo.
artifacts that can be
El
found all
siguiente
around the
video
globe.
trata de ello.
And the following video is exactly about this.
We don't always understand the message of the ancients, but that doesn't suggest they were primitive. Science is advancing and more mysteries are being revealed to us. What knowledge and technologies of our ancestors can be evidenced by artifacts that are found all over the world. On the head of the stone statue of the 4th century BC, there is something similar to a technical device. In the 17th century BC, people knew about cosmic cycles. With the help of the nebula sky disk, more than one generation of people who lived in those days watched the celestial bodies. Among the sculptures of the Palitana temple complex are girls with laptops and cell phones. The intricate open-work carvings in basalt at Warangal Fort in India are still a mystery to researchers. What was the purpose of decorating a fort? The existence of advanced technology is confirmed by perfect workmanship of the Hoysaleswara temple, impeccable lines, graceful forms on the columns and bas-reliefs, the images of a telescope, an astronaut in a spacesuit, and a rocket tells us that in ancient times there were air travels, including interstellar flights. Just imagine that 5, 10, and even 20,000 years ago, people were able to fly into space. The remains of the spaceport in Azerbaijan are proof of that. A helicopter, an airship, a glider, and a submarine were depicted by our ancestors on bas-reliefs in the Temple of Osiris at Abydos, Egypt. The 5,000-year-old Vimana flying machine, mentioned in ancient Indian epics, was found in a cave in Afghanistan. The Vimanika Shastra contains references to the writings of 97 ancient scholars and experts on the construction and operation of flying machines. The book describes 4 types of Vimanas that were fireproof or crash-proof. In India, many temples have been built resembling the forms of Vimanas. The 12,000-year-old Loladev plate is also an uncomfortable artifact. It depicts a disc-shaped UFO and a human-like figure. A civilization that lived 18,000 years ago left a lunar solar calendar carved from a mammoth tusk for its descendants. Multiple female figurines, aged 24 to 35,000 years, suggest that during this period there were people who especially revered the feminine principle. An even more ancient artifact of 30 to 36,000 years of age is a depiction of the Orion constellation on the mammoth bone. The question arises, why, having such technology, have we lost it? Why is it not possible to reconstruct them now? Why did high-tech civilizations disappear? What is important for us to know in order not to repeat their fate?
High technology, flying machines, and interplanetary space travel are all heritage of our history. And how come we know so little about it? What could have happened to that ancient, highly advanced civilization? And what do scientists say about it? On one of the islands on the Indus River in today's Pakistan, archaeologists found ancient ruins dating back 8,000 to 12,000 years. One of them was named Mohenjo-Daro, which means Hill of the Dead. Artifacts found during the excavations indicated that the city had been destroyed in an explosion. And the explosion was so powerful that it destroyed most of the buildings and about 500,000 people. When the excavation of Mohenjo-Daro reached the level where the streets were located, skeletons were found scattered all over the city, as if some kind of event took place that caused instantaneous and horrific death. And there was no apparent cause of violent physical death. Also found among the ruins were melted pieces of soil called black stones or tektites, tektas meaning molten in Greek. Analysis of the samples showed that the melting occurred at temperatures reaching at least 1,500 degrees Celsius. Similar tektites, melted down glacier formations have been found on almost all continents. And such an effect is possible in a nuclear explosion at high charge power. It is also known that extremely high temperatures are achieved during an atomic explosion, resulting in rocks and soils being melted. It's worth noting that tektite fields are mainly concentrated in the desert regions of the planet. And so the hypothesis of ancient nuclear wars is supported by quite serious evidence. Surveyor Patrick Clayton discovered large pieces of transparent yellow-green glass in ancient Egypt in the Libyan desert, which you can see on the photo number 2. The deposits of glass stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Archaeologist John Williams made a detailed description of several Scottish fortresses containing tektites. Since then, more than 100 ancient ruins with such walls have been found in Europe. All these mysterious glass walls are officially called vitrified forts. And according to scientists, high temperatures such as those attained during an explosion of a nuclear bomb are required to turn stones into glass. Ancient forts and towers have been found in Ireland, England, Turkey, Syria, the desert regions of the United States and Ecuador. Another sign of an ancient nuclear war in India is a giant crater near Bombay. The almost circular lunar crater with a diameter of 2,154 meters. Many very similar craters have been found in Siberia, South Africa. Why are these craters thought to be caused by nuclear explosions? Well, the fact is that nearly all of them are concentrated in desert areas, allowing the conclusion that they are related to the formation of these lifeless spaces. And many craters have the same size, which can be explained by a similar power of atomic charges. And of course, there are always tektites near these craters. Well, during the excavation of an ancient city in Rajasthan, radioactive ash was found over an area of 4 square kilometers. The level of radiation was so high that the inhabitants of this area began to have health problems, and this area was closed to visitors. Also, the ancient Indian epic Mahabharata tells of a celestial battle which can be taken as a description of a nuclear war. The weapon is described as a terrible iron mace and is compared in power to the red-hot sun. And it is said that this weapon could destroy the whole world. Let me read it. The great rivers ran in opposite directions. The horizon on every side seemed to be always covered with fog. Meteors showering blazing coals fell on the earth from the sky. The sun's disk, O king, seemed to be always covered with dust. At its rise, the great luminary of day was short of splendor and seemed to be crossed by headless trunks of human beings. Fierce circles of light were seen every day around both the sun and the moon. These circles showed 3 hues. Their edges seemed to be black and rough and ashy red in color. This hair of Vasudeva by name Samva will bring forth a fierce iron bolt for destruction of the Vrishnis and the Andakas. You wicked and cruel ones, intoxicated with pride, through that iron bolt you will become the exterminators of your race with the exception of Rama and Krishna. Thank you very much, and I pass the floor to the next speaker.
Thank you, Alexei. This information make you think. Vitrified forts, melted soils, tektites, ancient cities that were destroyed from mega explosions, and radioactive ash are all evidence of nuclear wars in different parts of the planet. Knowing the true story of the development and demise of past civilization, we can draw conclusions so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past. High technology is simply a tool. They can serve both as a development of human society and its destruction. It all depends on the choices we make and what kind of society we are able to build.
Sí. Hoy el futuro de la civilización depende de la elección.
Right. Today, the future of civilization depends on everyone's choices. In order to make a choice, we must understand what we are choosing. There is a lot of grief and suffering in our world nowadays. Crises of all kinds are killing people around the globe every day. The world is standing on an edge beyond which there is destruction of our entire civilization. Right now, it is extremely important for everyone to know that we do have a way out. we can change everything.
Dear
Dear friends, we are happy to invite you on May 7th, 2022 to the International Online Forum Global Crisis We Are People We Want to Live. It is a large-scale, unprecedented event organized thanks to the independent union of millions of people from 180 countries on the platform of the Creative Society. For the first time in human history, all of humanity is facing a common external enemy. This enemy is climate. In the face of a planetary danger, it is necessary to unite all people for the sake of the future of humanity, because we are people and we do want to live. Now, time is more precious than ever before. We must act already today, right now, so that we all can have a tomorrow. Dear viewers, we continue our Kaleidoscope of Facts. Next, we will learn about dolmens, saints, and a mysterious city in the middle of a desert. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Erika. Dolmens are ancient megalithic structures between 5,000 and 8,000 years old. They are found all over the world. Their construction differs depending on the region where they are located and the purpose of the dolmen. The average weight ranges from 15 to 30 tons. Dolmen come in different types: tile, composite, semi-monolithic, and monolithic. Geographically, most of the dolmens are located in the area of the 43rd parallel on the Black Sea and Mediterranean shoreline, and many such structures are located in Korea and England. If we open the map of faults of the Earth's crust, we will see the coincidence of location of dolmens with places of faults. Basically, dolmens were built with a portal located in the direction of the river or sea. Also, during their construction, the sunrise and sunset, the location of mountain peaks as well as stars and planets was taken into account. It is believed that these dolmens are planned architectural structures. Most dolmens are a sealed chamber with good acoustic characteristics, the whole of which is closed with a cork. All of them are humming and in a different frequencies. Let's try to understand the purpose of these structures. Dolmens were built in a geoactive points from materials with a high content of quartz, which has a piezo effect. The piezo effect is the ability of certain crystals, especially quartz, to convert one type of energy into another, that is, mechanical vibrations that enter the dolmen through geomagnetic faults are converted into electrical impulse when there is a resonance of electric vibrations with the vibrations of the megalithic itself. Sound waves occur. Due to the fact that the inner surface of the plates are usually aligned or polished unlike the outer ones, the dolmen chamber is a good resonator, similar to a Helmholtz resonator. Low frequency acoustic oscillations are generated inside the dolmen. These vibrations make quartz grains constantly contract and uncompress. An electrical field appears in the walls of the dolmen. This field affects the environment. Scientists are studying these processes by Robertson, Furdi, Schwardiak, Ulsen, and Yashkardian. Studies have shown that the dolmens exhibit increased activity during equinox and solstice, especially mark the hours of sunrise and sunset. At this time, at the entrance hall, the compass arrow deviates by 20 degrees. Near the dolmens comes silence. all becomes silent, the nature, birds and insects. A group of researchers led by Kurt Kienlein, a scientist from Bavaria, also studies the influence of dolmens on fluids and microorganisms. It turns out that the dolmens inhibit the activity of E. coli, Bacillus and some of other species. In particular, daily exposure of E. coli in the samples resulted in a 100-fold decrease in its number. Mainly, dolmens don't have any inscriptions. Sometimes they find ornaments in the form of the engraved wavy lines, zigzags, spirals, crosses and circles. There is suggestion that these are frequency settings like on radio. According to one hypothesis, a reference plot with a zigzag ornament was used as tuning fork, which could have been used as a receiver of sound production by the dolmen. According to another version, the signs and symbols found on the dolmen carry information in which the sacred knowledge and wisdom of ancient is stored to transmit knowledge to the next generations. Dolmens are far from being studied, but the most unstudied is the man himself. According to some researchers, dolmens help a person to enter an altered state of consciousness. That is, they can be used as an additional tool for a man to cognize himself, his spiritual component. And so we see that dolmens are engineering constructions. Their structure reflects on the fundamental laws of physics, this connection of spatial and geometrical form with design. Dolmens are also mechanisms for converting one type of energy to another. Ancient builders erected them to stand for centuries in geoactive points of the planet. Dolmens have always been located near water sources. Later, our speakers will tell you about why it was so important. And more about altered state of consciousness you can learn in the books by Anastasia Novak. Not only did builders of dolmens have serious knowledge in astronomy, mathematics, physics and geography, but they also had a different worldview that they have now. Despite the abundance of assumptions and versions, many secrets of dolmens are still to be discovered. Civilizations on the earth were changing, and dolmens carried the ancient wisdom of the people, knowledge through time. This is our heritage. Discovering the mysteries of Megalith, we learn about the world, we learn about ourselves.
Bu bizim mirasımız. Megalitlerin sırasını keşfederek dünya tanırız, kendimi tanırız.
I give the floor to Jonathan, who will tell us more about it.
Greetings, friends, and thank you, Tatiana. So the word Sidit has for a long time had the meaning of a sacred object for peoples of all continents. Sidits are found in the mountains, tundra, taiga. The legend of the Canadian Inuit claims that the megaliths were erected not by their ancestors, but by the people they call Tunits. The legend emphasizes the peaceful disposition of the ancient folk. Sidits are megaliths, objects made of quartziferous, quartz-containing stones. As a rule, they consist of three parts: the main stone, the stands, the foundation stones. The weight of some stones are more than 20 tons. They are arranged one by one in groups or of several pieces and in mass clusters of several dozens to hundreds. Sidits are mostly found in the northern latitudes. According to scientists, most of these megaliths are the heritage of the civilization that existed about 9,000 years ago. the largest numbers of cities archaeologists found in the tundra zone. According to historians, the population in the north a few thousand years ago was small. Therefore, it remains an outstanding open question who will process to install 100,000 stones. The Sami people, who used to live on these territories, kept legend about flying stones, which explained an unusual shape and structure of the cities. But it is obvious that the Sami are not unique builder of stone cities. The shape of the cities created the impression of instability, but these stones have remained stable for thousands of years. In general, cities have inclination in the direction of the next cities or in the direction of water streams. Near cities, vegetation doesn't grow, and the tree trunk are curved. In the place where the foundation and the upper stone meets, there is heating and melting of snow in winter. These cities are located along tectonic fault, geomagnetic anomalies, and in close proximity to surface or underground water flow. The stones are often trimmed on one or more sides. Cities amplify from several frequency bands: infrared, infrasound, low frequency, mid frequency, and ultrasound. Near the cities, the magnetic field is changed, the compass arrow begins to rotate, and the plumb inline deflected. Biolocation research carried out of S.N. Zelentov, candidate of medical sciences, by cities located near Sindor Zero, revealed the presence of geoactive zone. Around the cities, there are zones of 2.5 or 3 meters in diameters, in which biograms are deviating. There are interesting facts testifying a certain influence of cities not only on photos and human psyche, but also on the surrounding nature. For example, on the slope of a small hill in the middle of the Kola Peninsula, there are some strange cities around which the jag is not growing. There are mosses and berries densely growing around other stones which are situated near these cities. In another case, a huge cities placed on the edge of a cube stone has some effect on the grass growing about a meter from the megalith. The grass grows at an angle, copying the slope of the cities, as if its growth goes along the power line of the boundary. Some menhir, cromlech, and dolmens are known to sound an ultrasonic range at sunrise. It is possible that cities were raised and acted taking into account similar factors. Besides, the crystal structure of the stones raised above the ground on stand quite probably has interesting psychoelectric properties. The idea is also suggested that the mixed gender choice of stone is for cities and their stands. Having accepted the hypothesis about cities as some technical devices, the presence of their large number in places of fault become clear. Probably it continued to strengthening and directing the earth energy to the necessary direction for builders. There is an hypothesis that cities strengthen the influence of geolocal factors, and their activities depends on the cosmic rhythm. That is, the influence of cities of the environment and the person depend on the time of the day, time of the year, and phase of the moon. It is possible to assume that these complexes were built exactly for human. With the help of these complexes, their builders, controlling the energy of the earth, could influence a person, changing consciousness, curing diseases, conducting initiation ceremonies. We know almost nothing about those who created cities. They were distinguished by the ability to work with stones, knowledge of geolocal features of the earth, the presence of obvious engineering and high-stick ideas, with the very few cases of stones processing. The knowledge of cities builders differed from the modern world understanding. In fact, all modern technology are calculating on the improvement of external condition of existence, and the knowledge of the ancients was turned to work with the inner world of a human. The presence of cities complex in places of power, energy center of the earth, makes us assume that ancient builders were well aware of the properties and the structure of the planet, and they could use them as easily as a modern human uses a TV set. Ancient builders could move and install large and heavy stones, and they possessed practical knowledge unknown to modern mankind, with the help of which they joked with a high developed civilization of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Indeed, the sites are amazing structures. Looking at the images, it's not clear to me how some of them hold their balance and don't fall over. How could the multi-ton stones be mounted in such a way? Dolmens are no less surprising. At first glance, they look like stone boxes, but in fact, they are complex engineering structures, meaning the ancient builders had technology, which over time have been lost. Modern mankind has yet to learn and understand them. And now, we are going to get acquainted with the ancient city of Petra. The next speaker will tell us about the uniqueness of this city. Maria, you have the floor.
La antigua ciudad de Petra se encuentra.
Thank you very much, Julia. The ancient city of Petra is located in the territory of modern Jordan at an altitude of more than 900 meters above sea level. The construction of Petra was carried out in different areas starting from the 17th century BC. All the structures of this city are carved out of a solid rock. The material of this rock is sandstone, which has inclusions of harder material. The smooth cuts of these inclusions show that machinery was used, and what kind of machinery was used to build this city. It was really machinery. It is extremely difficult to achieve such an effect with manual processing. Particular interesting are the rooms which are carved at higher altitude and which are not accessible. What was the purpose of making these rooms, given the absence of stairs that lead to them? And how were these rooms actually built? In the next picture, we can see that the rock was cut at a great height to form a flat wall. This action is quite labor-intensive. The question arises, why was this actually necessary? And here we can see a cube, for the creation of which it was necessary to cut all the rock which was surrounded. The rocks next to this rock were also rounded, and there is the relief of the faces of cubes, which is repeated on other elements of this complex. The next construction is also quite striking in its scope. The superfluous part of the rock was cut off and a monolithic facade was created. On the roof, there were 4 elongated pyramids, and we can see them right now. It is this particular shape that creates a strong force field. We will learn about the effect of the shape of this particular shape from the next speakers. The wall behind these pyramids is also flat. Inside this structure, several rectangular rooms have been made of various sizes and different levels. In total, more than 800 such chambers were found in the territory of Petra. At measurement of resonance frequency inside the chambers, a response was received mainly on 94 Hz, and it means that these rooms were actually tuned on a certain resonance frequency. Given that the sandstone contains many quartz crystals, which also have a piezo effect, we can assume that we are seeing here the same technology in the dolmens. Like with the dolmens, the Petra Mountains are located in a zone of geomagnetic faults. The geofault is a source of seismic noise, and these chambers are actually resonators of natural infrasound. As in many other megalithic structures, such as Sacsayhuaman and Gunung Padang, we see the remains of hydraulic engineering structures. The constructors of Petra had a very high level of engineering knowledge and expertise. Originally, here the river flowed through the Sick George, but the constructors turned the river along an artificial channel and lined it with blocks. They created a man-made tunnel in the rock about 90 meters long. It is presumed and assumed that at the entrance of the gorge there was a dam of 13 meters high. And there were also 2 water pipes on top of this rock. You can see this rock now in the picture. More than 200 cisterns for storing water were carved here, and also numerous underground storage tanks for storing water. By natural slope, all the water from the entire area flowed into the gutter. The gutter runs along both sides of the gorge and follows all the bands which follow it. Both channels were originally closed with slabs, huge stone slabs, which have preserved in some places. Along the way, the water was also purified. They found many cavities where the heavy fractions must have been deposited. At this time, currently, more than 200 kilometers of ceramic pipes have been found in Petra and the surrounding area. The construction of these pipes was not very simple, obviously. The cross-section and conjunction of the pipes was arranged in order to increase the capacity and to remove breaking at the joints. Just think about what was the engineering plan, how sophisticated it was, and how was it possible actually to build more than 25 kilometers of water tunnels. Here in the picture you can see how these tubes were built and arranged. And you can just imagine 200 kilometers of pipelines with the use of engineering tricks, special tricks, so that the water would not only flow but also wouldn't pulsate. Lead pipes were also found here and there in some places of this site. It is assumed by scientists that these pipes were actually damped excess radiation. The capacity of the entire system in Petra was about 40 million liters water per day. That was enough to sustain a city of many thousand inhabitants. All this suggests such an idea that there was some kind of a large-scale technological process where water played a key role. Why was such an elaborate, sophisticated solution necessary at that time? Archaeologists say that Petra is a city. However, there is not a single sign of its actual city here. There are no buildings, no streets or squares. It is thus niches in the steep cliffs, cisterns, and many kilometers of networks of pipes and culverts.
Este grandioso complejo megalítico es un artefacto creado
This is a
por el
megalithical
hombre
complex which represents a technogenic structure, and it is based on wave process of physics, some gigantic transformer one type of energy into another, the principle of which is we yet have to uncover.
Thank you, Maria. Petra is really a unique complex which hasn't been fully studied. And again, we observed two regularities, unknown construction technologies and the presence of a water system near these megalithic structures. Along with the ancient cities, there are other unique structures. There are a number of Neolithic observatories. Why did people in ancient time attach so much importance to astronomical observatoriums? Perhaps there was some global purpose to it. Stay with us. There are many more interesting things ahead. And now I suggest to watch a video about ancient observatories.
A lot of ancient observatories are being found all over the world, which were built by a single template and oriented towards the sun. Angkor Wat in Cambodia, Abu Simbel in Egypt, structures on the Easter Island, Machu Picchu, Stonehenge in Great Britain, Tiahuanaco in Newgrange, in Ireland, and a lot more. Claims that the way these objects are organized has a number of common features. If you look at the paleo-astronomical structures from space, you can clearly distinguish their architectural structures. It is either circular or pyramidal. Besides that, the monumental structures are surprisingly oriented precisely towards the same points, despite their different locations. Satellite and archaeological data show that these are the points of sunrise and sunset during the solstice equinox days, which had a very important meaning for the ancient people, since those points are the baseline for yearly cycle determination. Thus, the Mayan Indians achieved very high precision in their observation of celestial bodies by using a special method, observing the stars through long and narrow slots, the sites of observatories. The windows of observatories are directed towards the sunrise points during the days of spring and autumn equinoxes, and summer and winter solstices. The sunlight goes through the observation camera only during specific days. Mayans knew the fact that everything is cyclic in the sky. The universe is a cycle inside of a cycle, or a wheel in the wheel. That's why a lot of scientists agree that all observatories are complexes of unique structures, which represent devices of gigantic size. The geometric correctness of these structures allows us to detect all key moments of the sun movement with amazingly high precision, observe planets of the solar system, determine the coordinates of celestial bodies, and detect all astronomically significant events in space. Special attention was given to observing constellations. By observing the movement of celestial bodies, the ancients noticed that the common allocation of stars in the sky remains intact, whilst the sun and planets move relative to the stars. For example, the movement of the Earth on its orbit during the year shows a monthly change in constellations against which the sun rises. The precession effect makes the spring point occur a little earlier each year, causing it to gradually pass through all zodiac signs, and each sign takes 2,160 years. So, the entire cycle takes 25,920 years.
Muchos observatorios fueron construidos por las civilizaciones hace muchos años. Aunque los pueblos
Many observatories were built by civilizations many centuries years ago, despite the fact the ancient people were separated from each other by thousands of kilometers. All constructions have common patterns and structure. Their distinctive feature are the structures of the type of stone gates distributed in a circle, in order to observe the solstices and equinoxes. Observatories found around the world suggest that ancient civilizations had remarkably accurate astronomical observations. All of these structures were intended not only to determine the solstices and equinoxes, but also to observe the planets. These observatories were also needed to determine the time accurately. The ancients probably knew much more about time than we do and knew how to manage it. There is a single time for the universe. Any material object becomes dependent on time and space. The duration of its existence depends on it. However, time itself is the rate of consumption of pure energy. If we take our entire universe, there is a certain amount of pure energy. But there is also individual time. In other words, time is manifold. Based on centuries of observations, it is assumed that the period of a complete revolution of the Earth relative to the fixed stars remain unchanged, stellar day. The stellar time scale is not related to the motion of the Sun, by which humankind lives. Observations show that the duration of a true solar day fluctuates all the time. Our ancestors observed time and knew about its cyclicity. Prehistoric builders had an amazing knowledge of geometry and astronomy. All the constructions are built with geometrical regularity and similarity according to the star charts. One of these unique objects was found in Israel, and it is called Galgal Refa'em.
There is a megalithic structure on the territory of Israel that includes several regular concentric circles of gigantic size. Its shape can only be seen from a bird's eye view. In Hebrew, the site is called Galgal Refa'em, the wheel of spirits, or the wheel of giants. In Arabic, the site is called Rujum el-Hiri, the mount of the wildcat. It represents a megalithic structure built, according to archaeologists, in the 3rd millennium BC, and consisting of 42,000 of basalt boulders, which form 3 regular circles. The diameter of the outer circle is 150 meters. In the center, there is a mound which was erected much later, 1,000 years after the construction of stone circles. The height of the mound is 5-6 meters. According to the description, Galgal Refa'em was the center, and around it there was settlements at a certain distance from it. Immediately around Galgal Refa'em, at a distance of 300 to 350 meters, there is a kind of exclusion zone, where nothing was built, and farther there was a settlement of several hundred houses, which was apparently the center of the whole district. This site is interesting not only for tourists, but also attracts many scientists.
Azimuth number 3. It was shown that there are 2 huge boulders in this part of the wall of about 15 tons each that produce such a site. And this site indicates the day of the equinox, both the vernal and the autumnal. This is what it looks like at dawn when you're standing in the middle of Rujum. It's amazing. The gate slits overlook the high mountains, not the sky. There are also specific dates that are marked with azimuths from Rujum. We were digging right on June 22nd. I just went down to the chamber to have a rest because it was getting hot, and then I saw this. It is really much cooler. I mean, the sun doesn't rise through the wide gate, but it peeps into the central chamber through this narrow shaft. I couldn't understand what to relate it to until I saw similar structures in Ireland. There's a thing there which is called a roof box. It's a little window over the entrance to a dolmen, or this kind of a monument that's built to let the sun shine through it. And look, this little slit is marked with a circle. There is a hole in the ceiling and this narrow long slit of almost 4 meters long that goes through the entire thickness of the chamber. The sun that rose on June 22nd did not just pass through the corridor. It pierced the entire thickness of the dolmen and fell right on that huge stone, which is mistakenly called the threshold, and actually obscures the entrance to the chamber exactly on this date.
Proportions of the golden ratio and the Egyptian triangle were laid into the dimensions of the wheel of spirits. Geobiologist Richard Ben-Ishai expressed his opinion on the ancient structure. Why do you think ancient people built structures not intended for habitation?
The proportions of the circles are reported to be related to the golden ratio, as well as to other sacred numbers. These circles are lined up in such a way that, let's say, every year there is a solstice, and they could see the solstice from a certain position.
Thus, we can see that this is an ancient observatory.
Sandık adı verilen birden 6'ya kadar numaralandırılmış. Kayalık zirveleri olan bir kum taşı.
In Hakassia, there is found a chain of sandstone mountains with rocky peaks, which are named Sunduki. The name arose due to the shape of the rock massif, which was right angles and resembles the shape of a traditional chess, sunduk in Russian. Archaeological research shows that the tract has been actively used by people for 30 to 40,000 years. Of the entire mountain range, the first sunduk, which is rocky, cube-shaped top, looks the most impressive. Scientists believe that this particular chest embodied the ancient knowledge of the world mountain, around which the moon and the sun revolve. Near the fifth sunduk, the temple of Im with a sundial is located. The sundial looks like a series of notches in a curved line. Scientists have determined that it was a counting system to explain the solar and lunar cycle while counting time and making the calendar. Temple of the time and the suns is now on the picture. Scientists also found that there were purposeful observations of the stars in the study area. Arcturus in conjunction with the stars of the Orion constellation, in particular Betelgeuse. Here we can see man-made objects to observe these stars. Observations of Arcturus were made to determine the periods of the winter solstice and the middle of the spring and summer seasons. Scientists also found petroglyphic inscriptions on these rocks. They contain references to the worldview and myths of ancient Aryan tribes, particularly Zoroastrianism. The petroglyph, which is White Horse, is located on the northeastern slope of Mount Karatag, northwest of the first Sunduk. Scientists assume that the drawing appeared about 16 millennia ago. There is also another petroglyph. On the head of the central figure, Varuna, there is a sun disk. Above the solar disk, there is a round disk of the full moon. All taken together, the 12 disks on Varuna's head symbolize the 12,000-year world cycle, and the ruptured sixth disc symbolizes the beginning of the era of mixing of good and evil. It is interesting that only 6 millennia ago, there was a transition from peaceful communities of matriarchy to a militant patriarchy, and the creative format of society was replaced with a consumer society, society of consumption. Also, it is possible here to see in this image the world snake of waters, which holds the tail in the mouth and forms by itself a shelf of the world egg of the universe. The symbol of the serpent biting its own tail was quite widespread among different peoples in ancient times. It marked not only the beginning and the end, but also the self-maintaining of natural cycles, the cyclical nature of time, birth and death.
Altıncı iyiliği ve kötülüğü karşılama çağının başlangıcı deniliyor. Sadece 6000 yıl önce dünya ana erkeliğini toplumlarından milletin ata erkeliğine geçti olması ve toplumun yaratıcı biçimini yerini tüküm toplumuna alması ilginç. Ayrıca burada kuyruğunun ayrıcasının en evrenin dünya yumurtasının kabuğunu oluştur. Sıradan dünya yılanının görünüşünü görebiliriz. Kuyruğunun astığı yılan sembolü eski zamanlarda farklı halklarından sırasında oldukça yayınlandı. Sadece başlangıç ve bitişini değil, aynı zamanda doğal döngüsel kendi kendine dağısını doğum ve ölümde işareti ediliyor.
Thank you, Lina. Interestingly, about 14,000 years ago, people had knowledge about the creation of the universe and the cyclical nature of all processes occurring in it. And in fact, modern man thinks of time as of a straight line on which we can mark the past, present, and future. But ancient people represented time in the form of a wheel or spiral. Time for them was directly related to space and motion and conditioned by the rapid flight of our planet in the cycle of other celestial bodies and stars in a spiral. Modern scientists confirm that time exists because of motion in space. Without motion in our universe, there would be no flow of time. It is noteworthy that our planet does not move in a straight line, but in a spiral. We think that ancient people did not know anything outside their village, but as it turns out, they were well versed in the solar system and knew about the 24,000-year precession cycle of the Earth. Circular calendars are the heritage of many ancient cultures. They reflected an understanding of the cycle of time. Everything in the universe moves in a circle until it happens again, the ancient Mayan said. In ancient times, as well as now, time intervals were fixed based on the periodicity of the movement of celestial bodies. By observing the sun or moon and sometimes other planets, people made solar, lunar, and other calendars. The learned priests of an ancient Mayan civilization constantly made astronomical observations, paying particular attention to the recurrence of natural phenomena. Maya simultaneously used several types of solar and lunar calendars, and always the Venusian calendar based on observation of the cycle of Venus. The calendar looked like a circular disc, with circles nested inside each other, large, medium, and small. The Tzolk'in year consisted of 260 days, or 13 months of 20 days. It had a special ritual significance. The Tun year consists of 360 days, or 18 months of 20 days each. The Tun year was used in the chronological records. A Hab year was 365 days, or 18 months of 20 days. 5 more days were added at the end of the Hab year. They made up a sort of a short month called Vayeb. Days and months were designated not only by numbers, but also had hieroglyphic names. Every 4 years, there was an overlap, a repetition of the name of the days and the numbers of the months. This was the so-called 4-year cycle. The 52-year cycle was a combination of Hab and Tzolk'in. In order for the Hab year to begin again with the same name day, the same number of the 13-day week, and the number of the months, 13 4-year cycles had to pass, i.e. 52 Hab years or 73 Tzolk'in years. The equality 73 by 260 equal 52 by 365 synchronized both ancient Mayan calendar systems, i.e. the serial numbers and date names began to repeat in the same form after 18,980 days. A striking analogy is found between the Tzolk'in year and the chronology on the planet Phaethon. Phaethon was the 5th planet in the solar system, orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. Learn more about the planet Phaethon and its demise in episode 3 of the Kaleidoscope of Facts, Paleocontact, Alien Civilization, Disclosure of Secrets. 1 year on Phaethon lasted 260 Phaethon days, or 1,898 Earth days, or 5.2 Earth years. 1 day on Phaethon was divided into 20 equal parts, or 20 hours. The date of the death of the planet Phaethon on August 10, 3114 BC is incredibly close to the date of the beginning of the Mayan calendar, August 12, 3113 BC. At the same time, the synodic period of the planet Venus, 583.92 days, was masterfully integrated into the calendar. This is the interval of the time during which the planet will return to a given point for an earthly observer. This peculiarity of the Mayan calendar constituted its amazing accuracy. The course of time was measured simultaneously by different systems of counting, necessarily based on astronomical events, and the join of these mutually intersecting cycles on one calendar system gave it such a high accuracy. It is worth noting that the Maya carefully kept records of all important events. Each record was provided with a detailed calendar date and drawing. Every certain time interval, 5, 10, or more years, a stone still with historical records carved on it was installed. Particular attention was paid to fixing and recording the synodic periods, that is, a periodicity of the apparent location of the planets around the Sun, and the periods of Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn synchronization. They knew that all the planets returned periodically to their starting points. Saturn in 29.49 years, Jupiter in 11.86 years, Mars in 1.88 years. The Mayans knew the fact that everything in the sky repeats itself cyclically. Every phase of the moon repeats. After a certain time, the sun returns to a certain point on the horizon. And when it does this 5 times, the 8 cycles of Venus are also completed. The universe is a cycle within a cycle. Everything in the universe moves in a spiral until it repeats itself again. Unfortunately, much of the knowledge of this ancient, amazing civilization will remain a mystery to us. The richest library of the Maya was burned by the Spanish monk Diego de Landa because, in his words, it contained nothing but superstition and devilish lies. The Maya closely tracked the cosmic cycles. They kept detailed records. Every hour, every day, every month, every century, every millennium was counted and numbered, connected to a set of specific signs. Each date was double-checked with an entirely different system to make sure that not a single mistake was made. They had a concept, on earth as is it in heaven, which meant that since everything in the sky repeats in cycles, so does everything on earth. We are the part of the same system. Using the system of chronology, astronomy, and astrology, the Mayan priests understood at what stage of the cycle and development of the earth and humanity was, and therefore they could forecast the key moments of the future. Maya knew the precession cycle of 24,000 years. They were aware of floods, the eruption of volcanoes, and other cataclysms, which were marked by them on the precession time scale of the Earth axis. On the same precession scale, they observed the inevitable approach of the critical points, cataclysms. The Aztecs and Incas also had very similar calendar system. This indicates a common origin of knowledge. The era in which we modern people live was called by ancient Indians the end of the fifth sun. They were also aware of 4 previous suns which ended in great climatic catastrophes. This knowledge is confirmed by modern science, which states that once every 12,000 years and once every 24,000 years, our planet passes through certain areas of cosmic radiation, which destabilizes the core of the Earth. As a result of this unbalancing of the core, we are already seeing the activation and synchronization of volcanoes, typhoons, floods, and other disasters. Such catastrophes have repeatedly swept humankind off the face of the Earth. Those who survived have long kept the knowledge of this cycle and tried to pass it on to their distant descendants by means of special megalithic constructions with encrypted astronomical knowledge and dates. Despite the fact that Maya knew about the cycle, their calendar ends in 2012. Why? Because 2012 is the beginning of the time of the crossroads, a time of global choices that determine the future of all humanity. The Maya could not predict how the fate of humanity would develop further, because now everything depends on the choice of each and every one of us. It is interesting that the Book of Alatra was finished on the 21st of December 2012. The information it contains can help people make a conscious choice.
Thank you, Yulia. Indeed, Knowing about the cyclical processes that occur in the cosmos and affect the Earth means knowing how to survive. Nowadays, this knowledge is more relevant than ever. Today, we have been talking about civilizations that have come and gone. This civilization knew about cycles of 12,000 and 24,000 years, knew that at the end of each cycle, there are global climatic disasters. Our ancestors left behind megalithic complexes that can help us withstand climate destruction. What influenced the location of these complexes? What knowledge were the ancient builders guided by when choosing a place for their construction? The next speaker will tell us about this. Alexander, good evening.
Good evening, everyone. So exactly, the relationship of the location of ancient megalithic structures is actually a multifaceted topic. I mean, it includes knowledge from different sciences. And what is interesting that all this knowledge from these sciences is intervened into one single knowledge. And they are actually inseparable from each other's. And in the ALLATRA book, we see this relationship, simple, accessible, and understandable to people. For example, it is written in the book about the direct connection between geometry and physics, meaning about the geometry of the universe space, about 13 semi-regular polyhedrons, and the primordial scheme of their arrangement. We saw already that this knowledge existed in ancient times, and we can find the remnants of this knowledge in the same ancient megalithic structures in the form of symbols and signs that we can find there, and even in the location of these structures on the planet Earth. So let's look at this topic together. There is a hypothesis that there is a crystal lattice in the body of our planet. In the middle of the edges or on the tops of this crystal, there are centers of seismic and volcanic activity, atmospheric centers of action. There is high and low atmospheric pressure areas and other natural anomalies. We can find information about these lattice in various ancient sources and folklore. It is formed by putting regular polyhedrons into each other. There are also an interesting map drawn or redrawn by Admiral Pierre Reis around 1513. It is interesting to know that the outlines of the codes are very accurate, and which suggests that this map is assembled from fragments of very ancient maps, dating back to the first few millennia after the Great Flood. Researchers have found that map shows a grid system that exactly matches the dodecahedron configuration superimposed on the globe. You may ask, what does the modern science knows about it? And the latest research in the geosphere indicates that our planet has a peculiar force field in the form of a global ternary crystal with 8, 12, and 20 vertices, formed due to growth of the inner iron core of the planet. Rays of this crystal, or more precisely its force field, form the icosahedron, dodecahedron structure of the Earth that is claimed by several groups of scientists, one of them led by Professor Refa'em. This force field is a projection of the Earth core crystal. And the assumption that the Earth core the properties of a crystal has recently been fully confirmed by a study of seismologists led by a member of Nobel Committee on Physics, Börje Johansen, as seismograph measurements show the movement through the inner core, show the propagation of so-called transverse S waves, which oscillates in a plane perpendicular to the direction of the propagation. Although neither pure iron nor various iron-nickel combination, which is known by science that our core consists of these metals, they do not behave this way. And in 2021, John Broadholt, professor of mineral physics at University College London, and his colleagues suggested that based on seismic measurements, the inner core is in a so-called super iron state. which means it's simultaneously in the liquid and solid phases. Heavy elements of iron and nickel ions form a crystal lattice, and light elements such as hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen flow freely between them. Under high temperature and pressure conditions, iron crystallizes with the formation of what is so-called close dense hexagonal packing of atoms. And the crystalline shape of the Earth's core affects the development of all natural processes on the planet. Our core is changing. There are processes of crystallizing inside it, and which put pressure on the mantle. In the crust of the planet, there are projections of regular polyhedrons inscribed in the Earth's globe. Icosahedron, meaning 20-sidron, dodecahedron, 12-sidron, and these 62 nodes formed by the vertices and the midpoints of their edges. Do the vertices and edges of the crystalline nucleus affect the properties of the Earth shells? The cubic core leaves a clear imprint in the mantle, observed of the Earth's surface by volcanic eruptions. There are maximums of seismic activity at tropical latitudes. From the physiogeographic point of view, the position of icosahedron vertices at latitudes around 30 degrees is especially important. I remind them the coordination of the pyramid, but I say Mount Kailas, is actually 31 degrees for the latitude and 81 degrees of the longitude of the east. And the latitude for the north. It's connected with the deformations of the Earth's crust in the northern hemisphere, caused by the displacement of the growing core towards the Arctic. And an interesting fact that most of the pyramids are lined up between 40 degrees of northern and southern latitude. One of the most striking manifestations of the structure of the inner core is the Great Barrier Reef, which begins at the tropic Capricorn and extends 2,500 kilometers in the northwest direction, indicating the expansion of the Earth. We can see this now clearly on this video. It's indicated that the mouth of the largest rivers of the world, the Nile, is 30 degrees of the east longitude, and Ganges 90 degrees, and Mississippi about 90 degrees of west longitude, are located on meridians multiple to 60, and the Ganges and Mississippi deltas are antipodal, meaning that they are in different sides of our planet. So one can draw a line through the core between them. And at the same time, the Ganges flows into the ocean near the Tropic of Cancer. We can also see this right now on the video. This crystalline core determines the meridional orientation of the continents, and also the fractal lines actually coincide with the icosahedron dodecahedron grid. The latitude edges of the inner dodecahedron project onto the Earth's surface to the north and south of the polar circles at 71, 72 degrees, and from the tropics at 90 to 20 degrees, as we can see on the next picture. And approximate centers of subpolar magnetic anomalies are located near latitude 70. They are Canadian, Siberian, East Antarctic, and West Antarctic. Another interesting fact that the main numbers of SAIDs are located at 60 degrees of north latitude. The middle between the projection of icosahedron and dodecahedron vertices and the north hemisphere stretched along the 51st degrees latitude, or of the golden ratio of the planet. The parallel of the golden ratio in the UK, for example, is occupied by Stonehenge, Avebury, Wright Stones, Stand and Drew, and several other Neolithic observatories. Their geographic analogues are found on the continent, and for example, they are Geodesic Circle, Archeim, Sandukia Observatory. And on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean in Canada, there are geoglyphs, or so-called doctor wheels, located again in the 51 degree of the north latitude. Also, there is a regularity in the location of megalithic objects of antiquity between 42nd and 44th degrees of northern latitude. For example, majority of dolmens pyramids in Bosnia, Žrljivica wells in Croatia, Etruscan pyramids in Italy, Lepertus pyramid in France, Aztlan pyramid in North America, and other constructions are situated there. There is certain irregularity in the location of the centers of the ancient structures relative to the geographic poles and the planet's equator. And we can see this also on the video. And so the Proto-Indian culture and the East Island culture in the Pacific Ocean are respectively located at 27 degrees north and south latitude. These areas lie at opposite ends of the line around in the center. As we know it, they're called antipodes. Interestingly, the pyramid mountain Kailas, the Teotihuacan complex, as well as the pyramids in Antarctica are on one line. And on this picture, we see this line in green. And close to this line, the drifts actually our Earth's magnetic pole. And on this picture, you can clearly see this drift drawn by the red line. Yeah, so most likely the interaction between this icosahedron and dodecahedron of the planet's core is important systematic process. There is another system which is that also one can find many notation. It's everywhere. For example, one of the walls of the temple of Osiris in the city of Abydos in Egypt, there is a so-called flower of life or hexafoil. This is probably one of the most ancient images of this sign. And there are others on various ancient megalithic structures, and not only. For example, it was so popular that maybe possibly people started to copy that. And for example, in this picture, we see this in a three-dimensional version under the lion's paw in front of the palace of serene longevity in the Forbidden Purple City in China. That is in the 15th century. And as we know, this sign carries a lot of information. Then the question arises, what was it intended to convey to us? The sign looks like a combination of circles, but in fact, it is a projection of the multidimensional structure on the plane. Hexafoil or flower of life, we can see that here, what is called a vector equilibrium on the video near me. It's a perfectly balanced field of force from which 12 equal rays of energy emanate. They stabilize the center like the 12 spokes of a wheel. They also form a geometric figure of pyramids pointing towards the center. This sign carries information about the system of basic harmonics in the universe. And it is a kind of a key with the help of which any system can be set up and work correctly. And let's see an excerpt from the program about magic with the participation of esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov on the subject of resonance.
Everything that falls into a resonance has a sound, meaning any resonance is an audible or inaudible sound of some sort. And that's why surely there is sounding. Well, let's recall those very Chladni figures, right? Well, those that are formed by sound, well, these are all the same effects. That's why any sign naturally has a sound. In general, let's say any interaction is certain vibrations of some kind. Vibrations are sound. Well, it can be put this way too. It's just that there is a sound which we aren't able to perceive or hear. However, the whole universe is nothing else but a sound.
Yes, a very interesting point, that the whole universe is nothing else but a sound. And the geometric shapes can sound, and very harmoniously. And if you take the right geometric shapes like triangle, square, pentagon, and etc., and turn the degrees into notes, we can play these notes together and we'll get an ordinary major chord. And since the crystal of the Earth is formed by regular polygons, we can calculate the frequency at which these crystals sounds. We also know that megalithic structures are capable of producing sounds in a different range of frequencies. Perhaps this way, resonance can be used to control various processes going on inside the planet and reconfigure them. And how it actually happens is something that we all of humanity, have yet to find out. But we can do this only together, only in unity, building the creative society. And now, continuing our kaleidoscope of facts, let's ask ourselves a question. What other factors did the ancients pay attention to when they build in structures? Our next speaker, Jason, will tell us more about it.
Let me restart. My microphone wasn't on. My apologies. Thank you, Alexander. It is interesting how everything is interconnected and influences each other. Before I continue with my speech, I would like to present our viewers with a concrete example of why we're so sure, besides the physical evidence, that the ancients had an understanding of signs, symbols, and sounds. In the 1600s, our modern civilization just rediscovered by two scientists, Leibniz and Newton, about calculus. And the information presented by Alexander just recently and the other speakers today requires that information. Whether we're discussing geometry, you have to understand trigonometry, and you have to understand calculus and its interconnected processes at the cosmic level in order to build these structures we are talking about today. That alone is proof that the ancients had an intellectual understanding of the different states of consciousness and how it influences our planet, the cosmological processes, and the human body. Now I'm going to continue with my speech today. Thank you all. It turns out that the ancient people did not choose a place to build these megalithic structures by chance. Apparently, they had the knowledge and technology to help determine the best locations. The influence of sound and the phenomenon of resonance are also interesting. Today, we have already heard about these acoustic qualities within the megalithic structures. The same sounding stones on top of the Gunung Padang pyramid, sound of dolmens and pyramids. One more pattern can be traced. Why do you think all megalithic structures were built in close proximity to water? As we learned from previous reports, megalithic structures such as pyramids, dolmens, observatories, and temple complexes have clear astronomical orientation. The main axes of these structures are directed to the points of sunrise, at the equinoxes or those very solstices. Also, ancient megaliths were built near water sources. If there were none, an artificial system of channels was created, as we have heard earlier with example from Petra. For example, you will see as well at the map of the temple complex of Angkor Wat, which shows a network of water channels. The wide ditch filled with water around the building has a volume of water of over 2 million liters, and this level was kept constant. Moving on, the pyramids and mounds of Cahokia within the USA, water is present nearby. The lakes and the bays of the Mississippi River. Another site, one of the main sites of Tiahuanaco in Bolivia, is the Pyramid of Acapana, as we have just seen on the pictures before us. At the top of the pyramid, there is a cruciform basin. In the depth of the pyramid, a complicated network of zigzag channels lined with stone was discovered. Water in these channels was supplied downwards from the pool on top, flowing down from one level to another. The water reached the ditch surrounding the pyramid. The American archaeologist Alan Colada wrote, During our recent excavations at Acapana, we unexpectedly discovered a very ingenious and monumental system of interconnected underground and surface drainage channels. These are the elements, as shown on screen, of the Acapana's aqueduct system. Thank you. Gunung Padang, the megalithic complex in Indonesia, which we discussed earlier, is also surrounded by rivers. And on the mountain itself, 7 springs were discovered. Pyramids in Egypt and Bosnia, megalithic complexes in South and North America, dolmens. There are many more examples. A question arises, why did the ancient builders pay so much importance to water? What do we know about water today? The unique properties of water are important for all forms of life on the planet. Our planet is made up mostly of liquid. Water is not only on the surface, where 70% is oceans and 30% is various modifications of matter, including water, but also inside our planet. Scientists recently discovered that the amount of water inside the Earth is several times greater than the volume of the world's oceans. The human body, just like our planet, is composed of approximately 70% water. In the year 1937, Nobel Prize winner Albert St. Pierre said that water is not only the mother, but also the matrix of life. It is in the complex structure of water protein macromolecules where the origins of biological information and development of all living things lie, including us humans. That is, since water is present everywhere, we can assume that by affecting water, we can affect all earthly structures. It is interesting that water molecules at low negative temperatures and high pressures can crystallize in the form of a double helix, resembling our DNA. This was proven by computer experiments by American scientists led by Zhao Xing at the University of Nebraska in the USA. Water behaves like a living thing in many cases, and we have not yet learned to read and decipher the signals of water. We know little about the mechanisms of activation of its functions. Water's memory is mentioned in the book Sensei 2 here on screen. I'm going to pause and read it. Any aqueous medium has peculiar cells in its molecular structure, something like mini computers. Global memory. Almost all information about matter is contained in them. If there is an impact on the water structure, starting from a simple mechanical, chemical, or electromagnetic impact, and up to, Sensei paused, trying to pick up the right words, and then said, well, let's put it simply, up to the energy of thought. Then the water molecule can be reshaped into a needed combination. For water retains the memory of all substances which have ever been in it, or which water has ever been in, or has touched via its energy states. For example, even such simple states as electromagnetic oscillations. And if we consider that water is the most widespread substance in nature, that it contacts with everything. It has left the screen. Moving on. At the end of the 20th century, scientists established that water can store information. An example that shows the informational nature of water is the experiments by the late Dr. Masaru Emoto. The Japanese researcher showed through numerous experiments that water reacts to human emotions and states, as well as sounds, words, and pictures. The screen, as you see, shows the results of his experiments. The properties of water have long been studied, gradually delving into more and more subtle mechanisms. Many scientists are searching for the answer to the question how megalithic structures are connected and how they influence water. Researchers P.V. Vasilik and R.S. Fordyce believe that in the past, there was a technology of impact of energy flows on water, which caused the appearance of some highly valued properties in it. In order to implement this technology, it was necessary to build massive and labor-intensive structures. But the builders of the megaliths believed that properties acquired by water justified these enormous efforts. The sun and moon, for example, were used as a source for pumping this energy. That is, megalithic constructions were intended for formation of energy flows arising in these constructions in certain calendar dates under the influence of effects of mutual positioning of that very sun, the moon, and the earth in order to change the properties of water. What properties could water acquire in megaliths? Kurt Kienling, a scientist from Bavaria, made such an experiment. Ampules with liquids 0.9% saline solution, 40% distilled water, were placed in dolmens. These ampules were kept in the dolmen from 5 minutes to 1 day. After a day's stay in the dolmens, these solutions acquired new properties. Namely, they began to favorably influence the meridian system of the human body. Similar to the way homeopathic drugs work today, the control samples which were not placed in dolmens did not acquire such properties. The therapeutic properties of the solutions kept in the dolmens remained unchanged for at least 2 years. In his book, Energy of Water, Ovi Mosen, candidate of chemical sciences, described the results of pyramids' influence on water properties. Quote, carriers of information may be physical fields of the most different nature, so the possibility of remote informational interaction of liquid crystal structure of water with objects of different nature by means of electromagnetic, acoustic, and other fields is established. A human can also be an influencing object, and as we know, megalithic structures generate such fields. Please take time to read. The film, The Secret Code of the Egyptian Pyramids, talks about the role of aquifers in the construction of megalithic structures. The authors of the film conclude that the pyramids are energy installations designed to generate energies people need, as we have heard earlier, with proper examples. So let's summarize this long example. Water has unique properties. It contains practically all of the information about our planet and everything on it. Water holds the very matrix of life itself. Nothing living exists without water. Megaliths are capable of transforming and retransmitting various types of energy, which also affect water. It turns out that they are located near water bodies, so it's clearly not by accident. The monumentality of megalithic structures ensures their preservation for centuries. This makes it possible to use them for thousands of years. A human being is able to influence the water structure by his or her state, and this influence can be both positive and negative. That is, by means of megalithic structures, a man can purposefully influence the processes occurring on the planet through water. Thank you all so much for the honor to speak. I give the word to the next speaker. Thank you.
Gracias,
Thank you,
Jason.
Jason.
Es un punto importante que
The
has
important
mencionado
point that you
sobre la
mentioned is
elección
human
humana.
choice. The
El
fact
ser
that
humano tiene
humans
la
can
capacidad
influence
de
the
influir en
structure
la
of
estructura
water
del agua.
by their
Y
condition,
esta influencia
and that
puede ser tanto
influence can be
positiva
either
como
positive
negativa.
or negative.
Sí,
That is,
podemos
we can
crear o
either
destruir
create or
según
destroy
nuestra
by
elección.
our choice.
Todo está
Everything is
interconectado. Los
interconnected.
procesos del
Processes in
cosmos
the
se
cosmos
reflejan
are
en el
related
flujo de
in the
energía
flow
de
of
la
the Earth's
Tierra.
energies.
Los
Megaliths
megalitos
are
están
built in
construidos
such a
de tal
way that
manera
they can
que
receive,
pueden recibir,
transform, and
transformar y
retransmit these
retransmitir esas
energies.
energías.
And
Y las
energies
energías
give
dan
new
nuevas
properties
propiedades
to
al agua.
water. As we remember, a human being consists of 70% of water, so you can draw conclusions yourself. How are energies formed inside the pyramids? How does it work? Let's watch an excerpt of the interview with Semih Osmanagic, the researcher of the Bosnian pyramids.
Our planet, our Mother Earth, is huge energy ball. When you have energy balls, you have energy flows. Two strongest energy flows on our planet, north-south, east-west. You build four-sided pyramid. You orient those four sides to the cardinal points. It initiates the movement of the energy inside the pyramid. So the first energy flow within the pyramid goes from the bottom, hitting 1/3 of the height, coming back inside, going to 2/3, coming back to 1/3, and completing the circle. 2D, it looks like a triangle and circle. 3D, you have movement of the energy inside the pyramid, and interestingly enough, so-called kings and queens chambers in the Great Pyramid of Egypt are built exactly on the way of this energy flow. Why? Well, being exposed to the pyramid energy, it improves the molecular structure of human beings. So, this is the first energy flow, which is tied to the orientation of the pyramids. However, there are two more energy flows. The moment you have the pyramid, energy starts flowing on the base and as a spiral going through the very top. And we were the first one to measure this energy beam going through the top of the pyramid. And finally, the third energy flow goes off the pyramid on the ground in the concentric circles, affecting the crops, the agriculture, even the societies and the social aspect, giving them the positive energies. So, the reason why mainstream archaeologists, geologists, historians, anthropologists, museum curators could not decipher this is they are taught in schools how to discover pieces of pottery or primitive tools. Nobody teaches them at the universities about the energy aspect.
Thank you, Dr. Osmanagic, for this fascinating information. But what are these energy flows that appear in the pyramids? Where do they come from? Let's try to understand together. So, different kinds of radiation and resonance acoustic phenomena are observed in and around megalithic structures, including pyramids. Enough research works confirm that megaliths and other ancient constructions, such as stone circles, pyramids, and dolmens, can not only receive and transform energy, but also generate their own energy fields. And all these phenomena can be explained by the shape effect and piezo effect. As previous speakers talked about how the piezo effect manifests itself, now we're going to focus on the shape effect. The shape effect is the ability of solid bodies of certain geometric shapes to influence objects of animate and inanimate nature as well as the surrounding space. So, the pyramid shape effect is widely known, but it turned out that it is not the only shape that leads to the concentration of some sort of energy. For example, the so-called magnifying batteries and plate-like circular structures also have this property. Well, as you see on the photos, a stack of hemispheres arranged coaxially, and such a battery is called a stack or a stack radiator. Only the battery is made of anisotropic material, meaning that it has a polarity, can produce an effect. French researchers Léon Chomry and André de Belizal studied stack radiators made of wood, as you can see on this photo. They found that the energy produced by such form consists of two waves, one vertical, which is harmful to humans, and one horizontal, which is beneficial for humans. And the effect observed at some distance from the flat side of the radiator, and it is similar to that which is recorded near the Sades, a local increase in temperature and suppression of biological life. The form effect that appears in the pyramid is well illustrated by Gribenikov's drawing and a photo of the pyramid made using the Kirlian method from Dan Davidson's book Shape Power, which you can see on this image. The two areas of altered states of the ether appear in the space surrounding such a material structure. Well, a compaction in the center of the pyramid and the flow over its apex. And sensors placed in these areas will register effects of acceleration or slowing down of the processes and the change of electric resistance and some others. Well, also the fact of self-sharpening of razor blades placed in the pyramid at the level of 1/3 of its height was reliably confirmed, and even a patent of such a method was issued. And researcher Dan Davidson reports that the pyramid can accumulate an electrostatic charge. Well, recently scientists studied the electromagnetic field formed inside the pyramid, and they examined the properties of the electromagnetic response of the Cheops pyramid to the effects of radio waves. These studies showed that the Great Pyramid of Giza accumulated electromagnetic energy inside its inner chambers and under its base, as you can see on this illustration. And spectrograms clearly show that the concentration of energy beneath the pyramid is formed. It is worth noting that the megalithic structures are multifunctional. The mechanism of extracting geoelectricity from the Earth's surface is at the core of how all these structures function. Well, our planet is a natural electric machine, and this conclusion was made by scientists relatively recently. You've just seen on the image just a couple of seconds ago. And several theories justify the electromechanics of the planet's rotation and the unified electromechanical essence of all natural phenomena. From these theories follows that many natural cataclysms, earthquakes, volcanoes and others are abnormal operating modes of this natural geoelectromechanical system, as you can see right now. There's a theory that pyramids work on the principle rotor-stator, influencing by additional electromagnetic field the planet's core and stabilizing it. So in order to stabilize the system and return it to its normal mode of operation, a large amount of energy is required. A network of megalithic structures most likely served to collect or generate such energy. And from the videos with the participation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov, we know that there are two main pyramids on Earth, and one of them is Kailash, and all the others work as repeaters. It is also known that some of the megaliths work without human involvement, while others require spiritually free people to be fully operational. And for example, closed chambers were found in the Great Pyramids which cannot be accessed while in the physical body. Well, therefore, we can assume that they were intended for an experienced and spiritually free operator performing work while in astral projection. We learned about this from a video with the participation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov, and so let's watch an excerpt together.
Well, Kalash is actually such an interesting topic because its facets are even called mirrors. That's why if we draw a certain parallel, even with a pyramid which is located in the coordination center, the question still remains open.
We can talk a lot on this topic. The topic is actually very broad and interesting. It can be approached from different perspectives, from an archaeological, from a historical one. But if we approach it from a technical, let's say, from a functional standpoint, what the pyramids are, let's say, for preventing something. But the question is different. For example, what's the use of a car if there's no driver, right?
People.
Certainly. After all, to make the equipment work, there should be those who can use it.
Enough to stabilize the planet, and we need an additional source of energy, and such source exists. Moreover, it is cleaner, and it is a human being. So the amount of this energy will be enormous if people can focus their attention on one common goal. Well, after all, a person's attention is a tremendous power. Take the double slit experiment as an example. Well, there is another phenomenon associated with the human attention. In quantum physics, it is called the Zeno effect. And this effect occurs when a quantum system is being measured fairly often. When the system is measured frequently, it seems to freeze in time, meaning the decay or tunneling of the elements stops. And we cannot avoid the observer effect here either. So most likely it plays a key role in these contexts. It becomes evident how the attention of 8 billion people could stabilize our planet Earth. So let's watch another short video.
It's just also very interesting regarding synchronization that nowadays ancient constructions are found which scientists actually associate with Schumann resonances, with the fact that in ancient times synchronization of people occurred, and these constructions which have the shape.
Places where people tried. Well,
yes,
not tried, but they really entered a certain resonance, meaning it was a synchronization of their inner vibrations.
Yes.
That exists, of course.
Yes, meaning these domes.
For certain purposes.
Yes, it is just interesting that the power of synchronization and joint efforts of people can influence many things.
Very many things. I'll put it this way. Thank God, in the consumerist format, we don't know much and we forgot a lot of things.
But if all people unite, it wouldn't even matter if the pyramids work or not, or whether we make them work, because then we will have the power to change everything, change things for the better, and everything depends on the choice of all of the people on Earth, on how to live, and no one will make this choice for us, as no one has the right. Tatiana, back to you.
Thank you, Alexei. Yeah, there is tremendous power, as you told, tremendous power in people unification. And if all of us can unite, then we will give them the knowledge, enabling us to survive the cataclysms.
Me gustaría dar las gracias a todos los que han participado en la preparación de este caleidoscopio de hechos. El amable equipo de diseñadores, los traductores,
yes, and as it was said today, the huge gratitude to our technical support and all of those who participate in today's Kaleidoscope Effect, because today's Kaleidoscope Effect is being translated into 14 languages. This is huge efforts by volunteers from all over the world. And this is a bright example of unification of people from different countries and different ages and nationalities who acts for the benefit of the common goal. We continue and we Going to the next topic. This topic is close to everyone because it concerns our common home, the Earth. What is it like? What is it happening right now? The following speakers will tell us about this. Ksenia, we give you the floor. Thank you so much. Dear friends, our distant ancestors knew that our planet Earth is alive and knew how to live in harmony with it, understanding how it functions. This helped to overcome cyclical cataclysms. In science, there is a definition of a living organism which is closely related to human psychology. Living organisms include only those whose properties are similar to those of animals and humans. Forms that differ from them in size, lifespan, volume of energy consumed, speed of metabolic processes, etc., and not considered by official science as living, and even more so as intelligent matter. It is human centrism that has led science into a dead end in relation to the planet and the knowledge of the laws of nature. But life is much more than simple combinations of elementary particles. It is their harmonious interaction according to a certain program. In his book, What is Life?, Erwin Schrödinger talked about the need to find the fundamental physical principles that distinguish living systems from non-living ones. In the primordial Allatra physics, as well as in Anastasia Novich's book, As a Osmos, we find information that thermal energy, as well as energies of electromagnetic and gravitational fields, can give an impetus to life. This life will be different from biological life. After all, amino acids are the building materials for biological organisms and not the carrier of the unique energy of life or mind. A living being is a creature that possesses consciousness, with the help of which it provides its conditions for survival, the extraction of energy for life, and the continuation of the species. A living object differs from a non-living. That living object has a program for life, an energy framework which forms and collects the elements of which it consists into a single system. A non-living object is one that has no program for life, or has already completed it. After this, there was a decomposition into the smallest elements, the building blocks of which all material objects are composed. Already in the mid-19th century, a famous German naturalist and encyclopedist, Alexander Humboldt, spoke of the validity of the Earth, its inextricable connection with the inorganic world. In the 1970s, the British climatologist James Lovelock and the American microbiologist Lynn Margulis made hypothesis that the Earth and its biosphere consist as a single organism that unites all living things on Earth. As of today, scientists believe that the Earth is a dynamic, psychological system that includes the biosphere and keeps our planet in harmony with life for more than 3 billion years. The Earth has almost all the attributes that characterize it as a living being. First, a highly ordered organismal structure. Second, metabolism.
Third, ability to develop. Fourth, ability to adapt to changes in the environment. Fifth, reaction to stimuli. The Earth is organized in the way that it is able to keep all the functions, all the parameters in the necessary regime by means of self-regulation. This process of preserving the Earth parameters requires the inflow of external energy and a mechanism for its reception and transformation. Such a mechanism does exist on Earth. It is plasma mechanism of the Sun-Earth relations in the form of radiant belt, ionosphere, and magnetosphere. Earth breathe. Tim Lenton of the University of Exeter studied CO2 detector reading from different continents. The scientists found a rhythm to the Earth breathing that varies with the change of the day and night. The Earth breathing was also noticed in areas of crustal fractures. This is a periodic fluctuations in the intensity of the magnetic field during the day and month, and also a period 5-6 times a day change in the volume of helium output. English scientists Hartmann and Curie discovered an energy grid on the surface of the planet. By measuring electromagnetic parameters in geometrically placed zones, cells, they found out that these cells open and close depending on the location of the sun, moon, planets, and other cosmic factors. An energy exchange takes place. A team of researchers led by Adam Frank, professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Rochester, published an article titled "Intelligence as a Planetary Scale Process" in the International Journal of Astrobiology. According to scientists, Earth is an intelligent being. Our planet may have a consciousness similar to that of other living intelligent organisms. The researchers described modern civilization as an immature technosphere. They said the following as a summary under their report. In describing the human role in Earth history this way, we don't mean to imply a triumphalist narrative whereby Western capitalist technological societies represent an apex of civilized behavior. Far from it. Part of the point of our exercise is to explore the limitations of the planetary civilization, which is at present largely incapable of existing coherent intelligent behavior on a planetary scale. It may be that in finding a mode of mature planetary technological intelligence, our future global civilization will have to draw upon the wisdom of many past civilizations, including those which have been trampled by the initial rush of globalization, unconstrained by planetary scale feedbacks. All material objects, living and non-living, are endowed with their own energy information field. For more information, watch Kaleidoscope of Facts 19, The Mystery of Human, Who Am I? This field of the Earth is noosphere. Some experts believe that in the noosphere, every thought, every word of every human being who has ever lived on Earth stays forever. Every day, a lot of people put their attention into negative thoughts. The appearance of negativity for the biosphere is like a gaping wound on the body. That is why our planet is sick. Is it possible to help our planet? The energy of negativity, hatred, and thirst for revenge is very destructive. A human emitting negative energies destructively influences the earth, and vice versa. If a human is enjoying happiness, thus he helps not only himself and surrounding people, but also the planet Earth. And if everyone tunes in to a positive wave of joy and love, then nature will be much more favorable to mankind. Everything is in the hands of the people themselves, especially now, at the time of the global choice of humanity. These are times of change in nature, times when the fate of all civilization is being decided. The time has come when countries must stop conflicting and create a unified system of warning and mitigation of disasters and earthquakes similar to the ancient megalithic structures. Thank you.
And let's look at what is happening to our atmosphere. And why our trees, excuse me, instead of absorbing CO2, begin to emit much more of it. Why? What is going on with the trees? Do they mutate so fast, or what? Not just in some particular place, but almost everywhere. As soon as the temperature rises, mutations begin.
Yes.
Yet, what is actually taking place? And we look, where does this CO2 go? Into the atmosphere. Where's the main reaction taking place? In the upper layers of the atmosphere. What happens? The lower layers drastically heat up, while the upper layers drastically cool down. Okay, such cooling and heating is formed. What does that lead to? Densification, right? Okay, what does densification of the atmosphere mean? If we look at those heights, the atmosphere is rarefied. That is, molecules. The molecules of gases, air, water, everything are at a great distance from each other. And when this kind of densification occurs, they begin to compress. What do they compress for? What's the point? And why does this always coincide with the solar minimum? Why is the solar minimum formed? What restrains it? The solar minimum reduces the activity of the sun. The electromagnetic field of the sun itself weakens, and the sun produces less radiation, which means that somewhere in remote areas, after all, it protects us with both its electromagnetic field and its radiation from something that comes from the outside, right? It means that more of something starts coming from the outside, and this more of something has to pass through our atmosphere to our planet and cause something. So warming takes place. And as soon as our planet feels that more of something begins to enter it than is necessary, what does it begin to do? Protect itself. That is, the immune system is triggered. So, as a result of this immunity reaction, the ocean starts to emit more carbon dioxide. Trees start to emit more carbon dioxide. There's an accumulation of it. And such a paradox occurs, which we observe today in our atmosphere. It is very similar to the skin immunity of our bodies. It's the first defense line the planet is trying to protect itself with. But if we take this seriously and say, is this actually possible? Then it turns out that our planet is alive. My friends, since our planet is alive, then we are parasites who do not live in symbiosis. We do not help it, but pollute, kill, and torture it. And in fact, as of today, we have polluted it so badly with our garbage dumps, landfills, and our activities that this immunity is failing. Do you know what this reminds me of? I'll give you a simple example. Those who are in the know will understand. A child gets sick. He has a temperature of 37.2 degrees Celsius, but we immediately start reducing his temperature. Give him antibiotics, strong antibiotics. After all, the child is sick, right? And we do this every time. Who will that person grow up to be? A healthy person or not? A being with no immunity will grow up.
So we found out that the Earth is alive and has consciousness. Therefore, like any living organism on the Earth, also has a mechanism of self-tuning and protection. Our planet is an auto-oscillating electromagnetic system. Thanks to this, it can independently maintain constant parameters inside the planet, in the crust, and in the atmosphere. That is, the pressure, temperature, chemical composition, electrical and magnetic characteristics of the Earth are kept within the most optimal limits for itself. And with external influences, it tries to bring these parameters back to normal, meaning to protect itself. To keep these parameters within the norm, the Earth needs energy, as well as a mechanism for its reception and transformation. Such a mechanism really exists, and it is the plasma mechanism of solar terrestrial bonds in the form of radiation belt, ionosphere, and magnetosphere. The plasma mechanisms of solar terrestrial bonds is depicted in this picture. The Earth's globe is in the center. The planet's radiation belt, shown in yellow, the ring current in purple, and the magnetosphere, the front-closed part and the back-open part in the form of a twin tail. This mechanism is completely invisible with human eyes, but the first spaceflight showed, with the help of instruments, that a radiation region is in the nearest vicinity of the Earth. This region is formed by Earth's magnetosphere field of electrons and protons. Now, the influence of the Sun on the Earth is minimal, due to the beginning of the electromagnetic field of both the Sun and the Earth. Therefore, protection from cosmic radiation is also minimal, and it's very dangerous for the Sun, for the Earth. After all, the Sun's large and powerful electromagnetic field protects the entire solar system from aggressive external cosmic radiation. And the Earth's magnetic field protects everything on the surface of the planet. It's a kind of matryoshka-like Russian doll-like protection principle with several levels. And now this protection is weakening on all levels. Our planet is becoming vulnerable to cosmic rays coming from the center of the galaxy. These rays affect not only Earth, but other planets of the solar system as well. Let's watch a video for that.
The galaxy is a single electromagnetic system that interacts with all objects in the galaxy, including the solar system. Any small change in the galaxy affects the Sun, and as a result, it affects all processes, not only on Earth, but also on the other planets of the solar system. The Earth is not the only planet in the solar system that is undergoing climate change. The growth of dark spots on Pluto and the polar shifts in Uranus, changes in the light intensity of Neptune, the melting ice caps on Mars make it clear that changes are taking place throughout the solar system.
The influence from the center of the galaxy is cyclical, and more than one the Earth has experienced global warming, the protection from which was an increase in CO2 levels. The source of information about our Earth's past ice cores, obtained by drilling wells in Antarctica and Greenland. What did their analysis We learned from an interview with Paul Kalender, Doctor of Science, PhD, geophysicist, seismologist, and forensic expert.
At the Vostok borehole, they took core samples from the hole in the glacier at a depth of several kilometers, about 2 or 3 kilometers. They drilled down to the lake below the glacier and extracted bubbles from each layer. And in those bubbles, they analyzed the contents of all the gases they could measure, plus dust. And they found out that there is a cycle of 120,000 years which showed during glacial times. It means that in those cold periods, there is a high dust content because there is less topsoil, of course. Mostly it is a dry and cold desert like the Gobi, and the topsoil layer is actually carried away by wind. So it's true for those polar regions too. During the time of glacials, it's cold, dry, and dusty. And in these interglacials, during the interglacial periods, while the temperature increase is primary, the CO2 content change is secondary. There are decades of delays between them. I made an analysis of the primary data drilled from the Vostok myself. It can be clearly seen that first, there is an increase in temperature, and then an increase in methane and CO2, and not vice versa. And it can be seen that CO2 is not the cause, but on the contrary, CO2 is the result of the change in temperature. That means Professor Males from Australia, who analysed this, theoretically showed that this is the result of glacial pressure in the atmosphere and oceans. When the temperature of water is high, or when the temperature of the ocean water is higher, it behaves like an open champagne bottle. It, CO2, escapes in a form of bubbles into the atmosphere and vice versa. When I have cold water, it absorbs more CO2 from the atmosphere. This means that there is a relationship of dynamic exchange between the ocean and the atmosphere.
So the increase of CO2 is a protective response of the Earth to warming, which is confirmed by studies, of course. Note again that the increase in carbon dioxide levels is a consequence, not the cause of warming. Here's another study. At the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, sea surface temperature, shown in blue, surface area temperature in red, and carbon dioxide levels in green were measured for 60 years. The graph showed that the peaks of CO2 growth lag behind the peaks of temperature by 11-12 months. In other words, firstly temperature increases, and then carbon dioxide level increase. And now let's understand why. In response to warming, the Earth starts to increase CO2 levels. To do this, let's remember the physical and chemical properties of CO2 and do a thought experiment. In it, we will make a calculation for a conditional atmosphere consisting of carbon dioxide and nitrogen oxide mixture, all of the conditions being equal, and we will not bother our viewers with conjectural calculations, but simply give the formula for calculating area beds and graph. The graph shows that the atmosphere with carbon dioxide has a lower temperature and the same altitude. And shown the graph by the dotted line. Thus, when mentally replacing the nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere with a carbon dioxide atmosphere with the same surface pressure of 1 atmosphere, the average temperature of the Earth decreases by approximately 6.5 degrees Celsius. Therefore, in the entire thickness of the troposphere, its temperature will always be lower. than in the nitrogen-oxygen troposphere. It is clear from all these that the saturation of the atmosphere with carbon dioxide, other things being equal, always leads not to an increase but also to an decrease of the greenhouse effect and the average temperature in the entire thickness of the planet's troposphere. The explanation for this phenomenon is very simple. The molar weight of carbon dioxide is 1.5 times higher, and its heat capacity is about 1.2 times lower than that of the Earth's air. Now think about it. As the previous speaker said, our Earth is life. And as a living organism, it switches on compensatory mechanisms to protect itself from its destructive influence. This mechanism involves increasing CO2 levels in the atmosphere in response to warming. This is done to lower the temperature. And what are people doing? They design plants to trap CO2, thereby further harming the planet. They forget that increasing CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere makes agriculture more productive and helps forest and vegetation to regenerate more efficiently, more effectively. We ourselves are weakening the immunity of our planet. Human activity has no effect on warming and global climate change, but it directly affects the environment, and as a result, the planet's immunity is weakened. And this is what is happening now with the immunity of our planet. The next speaker, Tatiana, will tell us. Thank you very much.
Atalarımız özellikleriyle hayranlık uyandıran muhteşem yapılarından bolca bahsettik.
We have talked a lot today about the amazing constructions of our ancestors, which are striking in their magnitude. It is worth noting that they have existed on our planet for thousands of years, being in harmony with it, helping it. And now let's look at the fruits of the activities of the present-day mankind for the last 150 years.
Taç Mahal'ın boyutuna yakındır. Puente Hills çöp sahası Los Angeles, Kaliforniya, ABD. Paraguay'da sivil bölge. Sonrasındaki foto olacak. Paraguay.
Посмотрим на картинки.
Maybu Şili'deki çöp sahası. Gerçekten de torunlarımızı bırakabileceğimiz sadece bu tür piramitleri.
Are these the only pyramids we can leave to our descendants? The garbage produced by mankind causes irreparable damage to the ecology of the planet. Until 150 years ago, the waste consisted mainly of natural products, such as paper, wood, food, wool, and cotton. They decomposed without much harm to the environment. But over time, trash is becoming more and more toxic. Its content of heavy metals, radioactive substances, and complex synthetic polymers, plastics, is increasing. Modern garbage piles are very toxic and continue to cause harm even after elimination. At the same time, waste disposal methods, incineration, gasification, or hydrolysis also lead to the release of toxic substances that poison air, water, and soil. We have created persistent organic pollutants that cannot be physically, chemically, or biologically decomposed. They are able to travel long distances and have a negative impact on human health and ecosystems. As a result, industrial toxins are already being found in newborn babies in their mother's breast milk, and the snow at the summit of Mount Everest is already so contaminated that it does not meet drinking water standards. Heather Petersall, professor of biological sciences, says, unfortunately, there is not a square millimeter of the planet that does not have some sort of pollutants or contaminant on it. So we as humans have succeeded in thoroughly polluting the whole planet. And so there are stories every day about how ecosystems are in crisis. And one more thing, we have the garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean, visible from the space. It is larger than France, Germany, Italy, and Poland combined. The garbage island consists of mostly of plastics. And let's find out what happens to plastic in the ocean in the interview with Gary Stokes. Could you please show the video with Gary Stokes? The ocean is the lungs of the planet. Scientists estimate that 50 to 80% of the oxygen on Earth comes from ocean plankton. These are floating plants, algae, and some species of bacteria capable of photosynthesis. It turns out that when we pollute the ocean, we kill the source of oxygen. So what are we going to breathe? The pollution of the water bodies leads to the so-called dead zones in the oceans. These are areas of the sea with very low oxygen content, where life is not possible. According to a UN report, the number of dead zones in the world's oceans rose from more than 400 to about 700 between 2008 and 2019. The size of just one of them in the Gulf of Oman is comparable in size to Scotland and continues to increase. The amount of oxygen in the atmosphere is also decreasing. Scientists from the University of Southampton in England report a decrease in the volume and density of the upper layer of the atmosphere from 101 to 80 kilometers over the past 20 years. During this time, at least 4.4% of oxygen has been irretrievably removed from the atmosphere. Today, no more than 16% remains. The chemical composition of the upper atmosphere is changing. Let's find out what this means for the planet and for mankind from an excerpt of the video Climate Threats, Variants of Survival, with the participation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
What is cyclicity is an external impact that creates the changes. What is cyclicity is an external impact that creates the changes, leading, again, to this very seismic activity. It will be enormously active. We will encounter the power of earthquakes that we haven't seen yet. We as humankind have not seen them. Well, I mean the last, our so-called civilization. What's next? Next, more will follow. This means, volcanic eruptions. We won't escape from them anywhere. There will be severe eruptions, including those of stratovolcanoes. And everyone knows it already. There is the rise of magma. We'll get to that a little later. Next, there will be precipitation, floods, subsequent icing and terrible cold. After all, what is happening now? And all this is taking place precisely because of the external factors, because of the influence of the universe, of other galaxies on our planet. If we look, the lower layers of the atmosphere are warming up very quickly, while the upper layers are cooling down very intensively. The most terrible thing is that the chemical composition of the upper layers of our atmosphere is changing very rapidly and significantly. And what are the upper layers of our atmosphere? Is that very blood. It's a defense mechanism. The main immunity should be there. But this immunity suffers as a result of the anthropogenic factor. So it turns out that we will not be able to withstand external impacts because of internal diseases. That's what the entire problem is. After all, let's say, every 24,000 years, such phenomena occurred and life was preserved. Yes, many things disappeared. Some plant species and living beings disappeared. However, humanity did survive. Well, with some losses, but minor ones. And again, why did that happen? Because the organism, I mean the health of our planet, was preserved. And as a healthy planet, it passed through this without major loss. In other words, we remained. Well, in this case, our planet is not healthy. I will give a simple example for you to understand. Sorry, it's a heavy example, but it's real. There is a man who has the last stage of cancer. In addition, he has a lot of different diseases and various parasites inside him, which actually caused all these diseases. Due to their activity and due to intoxication, they didn't control their population and multiplied to such an extent that they caused all these severe diseases. The man is barely breathing, he is barely alive, and to save himself and save the parasites inside his body, he needs to climb Mount Everest and come down. A simple question: will this man even be able to reach the summit of Everest? Not to mention coming down, of course he won't. He will die on the way to that summit, isn't it so? And now there is another simple question for you, friends. Will the parasites in him survive if he dies on the way to the summit? That's the answer to what is really going on.
Böylece toplumun
Thus, the consumerist format of society and our ignorant attitude towards the ecology of the planet have brought it to a state that can be compared to the last stage of oncological process. We have so badly polluted the planet with toxic garbage that its defense mechanisms have been significantly weakened. The planet simply does not have enough strength to survive the period of global climatic catastrophes associated with astronomical cyclicity.
Yes, Tatiana. As we can see, we have seriously ruined the health that is the ecology of our planet. With this approach, neither we nor our children have a future. At the same time, environmental problems are exacerbated by global climate change, and their causes is cyclicity. The combination of these two factors puts humanity at the brink of the destruction. We are only witnessing a worsening situation, and while we stand idly by, the crisis continues to mount, and there is less and less time to do something about it. People in ancient time knew about cyclicality and the fact that the climate was changing because of it. They knew and they were prepared for it. Huge megalithic complexes were built to go through this period with minimal losses. Our ancestors had the knowledge of how to activate the world megalithic pyramidal complex. But what are we doing? After all, scientists have long warned modern humanity about cyclicality and what is coming. Charles Hutchins Hapgood, American scientist, the author of the theory of the catastrophic pole shift with the periodicity of 11.5 and 14.5 thousand years. In September 1955, professor of Cambridge University, geologist Stanley Kate Rancorn, in his article in the Scientific American Journal, made the following statement. There seems no doubt that the Earth's magnetic field is tied up in some way to the rotation of the planet. And this leads to a remarkable finding about the Earth's rotation itself. The unavoidable conclusion is that the Earth's axis of rotation also has changed. In other words, the planet has rolled about, changing the location of the geographical poles. Graham Hancock, British writer and journalist, in his book Fingerprints of the Gods, writes, according to reports publishing in Nature and New Scientist, the last geomagnetic reversal was completed just 12,400 years ago, and during the 11th millennium BC. This is the same millennium when the death of the ancient civilization of Tiwanaku in the Andes supposedly took the place. About the same millennium remind orientation and features of the design of the great astronomical monuments on the Giza Plateau, as well as the nature of the erosion of the Sphinx. This list of cataclysms can be continued. A sharp rise in sea level, hurricane winds, storms, volcanic eruption, and so on. Researchers John Imbrie and Catherine Palmer Imbrie, in their book Secrets of the Ice Age, a century and a half in search of a clue, they say, according to the results of the analysis of the columns of the deep sea soils of the ocean floor, none of the Pleistocene in the glacial period lasted more than 12,000 years. Based on this statistic, we can conclude that the modern warm era has clearly entered its final stage.
Thank you, Tatiana. The situation is critical.
La situación es crítica. Como dijo Julia,
As Julia said in her presentation about Mayan calendar, it is up to each of us to make choice now, and this choice will affect the overall outcome. But do we understand between what are we choosing? Because our future is already being determined today, and time is running out. Knowing history, we can avoid the mistakes of the past.
The facts presented today show that we are not the first civilization on Earth, and there were civilizations with a higher level of development before us. They built megalithic complexes in order to be able to grow through the period of climatic changes which take place every 12,000 years. For us as a humanity, it is necessary to understand already how it all functions. The survival of our entire civilization depends on it today. Floods, earthquakes, landslides, abnormal cold or heat waves occur every day around the world. Cataclysms kill large number of people. They take away their lives, their homes and livelihoods. The number of climate refugees is rising day by day. The climate situation worsens with each passing day. Today, everybody is at risk. And all this is occurring in the background of processing social, economic, environmental, military, and human crises. Each day, more and more people die suddenly from climatic disasters. Those who experience and are experiencing daily the power and the force of the growing forces of nature understand that the only enemy of the humankind is the climate, and it is impossible to negotiate with it. Meanwhile, we are told that the cause of all climate change is anthropogenic CO2. In other words, that we are supposedly to be blamed for the fact that we are suddenly dying of cataclysm. While we are being persuaded to believe this, we are in fact dying from the cyclical processes on a cosmic scale. Our ancestors knew about this cyclicity. And this knowledge they have tried to pass to us through millennia, so we can save our lives in these times. But this truth is not profitable because trillions of dollars are made on the CO2 theory, whereas human life in our society is not valued in fact. However, in this current consumerist format of society, where people are fragmented and where money is valued more than a life itself, we as a humanity have no chance at all to survive. Humanity can only survive when human life is the highest value in society, and all aspects of life are based upon humanity. Today, there is already a great deal of evidence that in the history of our humankind, there have been people and entire civilizations who have managed to live entirely peacefully. They lived this way not for a limited period of time, but for hundreds and even thousands of years. They had no weapons and were engaged in various creative activities, striving to learn the world and themselves. According to historical studies, the main thing in life of those people were not the material and everyday affairs, but rather human, spiritual values. Thanks to this, they received the knowledge capable of saving not only themselves, but also their future descendants from certain deaths. Having immortalized such knowledge in monumental construction, they left it to the future generations. Now, knowledge is just as important to us as bringing people together. It is necessary to unite all scientists of the world in order to find solutions to the climatic and environmental crises, to provide clean drinking water and food for all people, and most importantly, to ensure the safety of all people in the world during the global climate disasters. The solutions offered by the consumerism format of the society are leading us to death. There is no place on the planet right now which is safe. There is no guarantee for anyone that tomorrow will be a new day. The way is to unite all of humanity around one single idea of building a society where highest value is the life of each person, where people have humanity, compassion, mercy, and simple respect, simply because we are all human, because there is a life in all of us. After all, if we discard everything superfluous and extraneous, the most valuable thing that we have in each of us is our life, as the life of our relatives and friends. What can be more valuable than life? Absolutely nothing. A creative society is beneficial to everyone, and in fact, every ordinary person wants to live in such society. However, we must understand that no one will do anything for us. No one will build or give us the world we all want to live in. The building of such a world is our responsibility, and we can build it only together, stepping over our pride and reaching out to each other. Today, the process of unification has begun and is gaining momentum. More and more people from various countries are grasping the idea of building creative society. And after having grasped the essence of this project, they understand that the creative society is beneficial for absolutely all people on our planet. Today, it is our only salvation in the face of global cataclysm. On the 13th of May 2022, the new release of Kaleidoscope of Facts, Benefits of the Creative Society will take place. We invite scientists, specialists, and all people who are not indifferent and to take part in this preparation of Kaleidoscope of Facts.
Thank you, Ksenia. We are coming to the end of our broadcast, and we want to express our gratitude to the friendly team of ALLATRA TV. Everyone who took part in making this episode of Kaleidoscope of Facts. We thank you, dear viewers, and invite you to take part in building a creative future for ourselves and for our children.
Yes, everyone can join in the creative process of building such a society, a happy society, in which human life is the main value. Only in the creative society, humanity does have a chance to overcome all crises and reach a new level of evolutionary development. And in conclusion, we suggest watching an excerpt from the video The Creative Society Unites All, with the participation of Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
However, today we certainly have cyclicity in climate change. It's a global system. But friends of mine, I'll disclose a big secret. It is possible to influence the global system by a global unification, yet globally. No matter how individuals strain themselves, nothing will work. This concerns everyone. If previously it concerned a certain region, the region could somehow correct the situation. But at the current moment, unfortunately, it is cycle, while cycle is globality. And here, everyone is globally needed in order to do something. Yet, if we find strength in ourselves, we will be able to build a creative society, we will be able to focus on the future and work on ourselves a little bit, then we will be able to do that as well. We will be able to turn everything back and to resolve climatic problems. We can do it. Such things did happen in the history of humanity. If somebody could, why cannot we do that? What hinders us except our disbelief and our fears, except our laziness? After all, again, people most often stop due to laziness, finding some excuses like why I don't engage in development of, let's say, that very creative society, why I straightly don't notify someone, and what do I need it for? Let others do that, right? And so, one or two of such lazy bones who don't want to do something for themselves and for their descendants, they stop the global system of development of the entire humanity, and humanity does not evolve. Yet there should be evolutionary development, and we should already be, at least we were supposed to have passed the first stage, but we haven't passed it. We are even far from reaching its middle. However, if we want to, we can make a giant leap and, let's say, jump over to the first stage. While the first development stage, my friends, is a tremendous evolutionary leap in the technological process, in science, everywhere and in everything. It is free energy and many other things. In other words, what is now considered to be science fiction can become reality, and everything depends on each of us.